What if I told you that everything you think you know about Area 51 is just the tip of the iceberg? What if the real secrets buried in the Nevada desert are so explosive that they've been hidden from the American people for over 7 decades? You're about to discover classified information that powerful forces have spent billions of dollars to keep buried. Information that connects ancient mysteries to modern black projects. Information that reveals technologies so advanced they would fundamentally change how we understand reality itself. My name is Marcus, and I've spent the last 15 years investigating government cover-ups, following paper trails that lead to dead ends, and interviewing whistleblowers who risk everything to reveal the truth. What I'm about to share with you isn't conspiracy theory. It's documented fact, backed by declassified documents, insider testimonies, and evidence that the establishment desperately wants to suppress. In this investigation, we're going to expose the 3 most shocking secrets about Area 51 that they absolutely do not want you to know. First, we'll reveal the underground network that spans thousands of miles beneath the American Southwest, connecting facilities that officially don't exist. Then, we'll examine the reverse engineering programs that have produced technologies decades ahead of anything in the public domain. Finally, we'll uncover the recruitment and containment protocols for personnel who've witnessed things that challenge everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. But here's what makes this different from every other Area 51 documentary you've ever seen. I've gained access to classified documents that were never supposed to see the light of day. I've interviewed former military personnel who've broken their silence after decades of enforced secrecy. And I've uncovered connections between Area 51 and other black sites that paint a picture so comprehensive, so disturbing, that it will change how you view not just this one facility, but the entire military-industrial complex. This isn't just about one secret base in Nevada. This is about a shadow infrastructure that operates parallel to our known government, with budgets that dwarf entire federal agencies and capabilities that seem to belong in science fiction rather than reality. The first thing you need to understand is that Area 51, as we know it, the place that shows up in satellite images and tourist maps, is essentially a decoy. It's the visible tip of an iceberg that extends far deeper and far wider than anyone imagined. The real operations, the truly classified programs, they happen in facilities that exist in a legal grey area, funded by black budgets that Congress never sees, and operated by personnel who've essentially disappeared from official records. I want you to picture this. You're driving through the Nevada desert on a highway that stretches endlessly in both directions. Miles from any town, you notice a road that doesn't appear on any map. It leads to a checkpoint with guards who aren't wearing standard military uniforms. Their badges display symbols you don't recognize, and their weapons are unlike anything you've seen in military surplus stores. This isn't speculation. This is the experience of multiple witnesses who've stumbled upon access points to what researchers call the underground network, a system of tunnels, bunkers, and facilities that connects Area 51 to installations across Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. Some of these tunnels were carved out during the Cold War as part of continuity of government programs. Others were built more recently using technologies that allow for rapid excavation at depths that would have been impossible with conventional methods. The scale of this underground infrastructure is staggering. We're talking about facilities that house thousands of personnel, manufacturing plants that produce materials not found in any public database, and laboratories conducting research that pushes the boundaries of known science. All of this exists in a parallel world that operates according to its own rules, funded by money that flows through channels so complex that even seasoned investigators struggle to trace them. But how do we know this underground network exists? The evidence comes from multiple sources, and it's more compelling than you might expect. First, there are the geological surveys. Independent researchers analyzing seismic data have identified anomalous readings that suggest massive hollow spaces beneath areas where no official construction has ever been announced. These readings are consistent with large underground structures, and they appear at multiple locations across the Southwest. Then, there are the utility records. Power consumption data for certain grid sectors shows usage patterns that don't match any known surface facilities. We're talking about electrical draws that would power small cities, all going to coordinates that officially contain nothing but empty desert. Water usage records tell a similar story. Massive consumption in areas where no agriculture or industry should exist. The personnel records are perhaps the most disturbing piece of evidence. Military contractors describe recruitment processes that involve extensive psychological evaluations, loyalty tests that go far beyond standard security clearances, and assignments to facilities that don't appear on any organizational chart. These personnel often describe commutes that involve multiple checkpoints, biometric scans, and transportation to locations they're never allowed to identify. One former contractor, speaking under condition of anonymity, described a daily routine that began with a bus ride from a staging area near Las Vegas. The bus had no windows, and the journey took over an hour through what seemed like endless underground tunnels. The facility where he worked was described as a city beneath the earth, complete with living quarters, dining facilities, and recreational areas. He estimated that over 2,000 people worked at this single location, yet it appears on no government roster and receives no public funding. The security protocols for these underground facilities are unlike anything in conventional military operations. Personnel undergo what's called compartmentalized isolation. They're assigned to specific projects with no knowledge of what happens in other sections of the same facility. Communication with the outside world is strictly controlled, and many workers live on site for months at a time. The psychological pressure is intense, and turnover rates are high, but those who stay describe working on projects that seem to belong to a different era of human development. What kind of projects warrant this level of secrecy? The answer leads us to the second major secret about Area 51, and it's one that challenges everything we think we know about the pace of technological development. The reverse engineering programs at Area 51 and its associated facilities represent the most classified research initiatives in human history. These programs take recovered materials, study their properties, and attempt to replicate their capabilities using human manufacturing techniques. The source of these materials is officially classified, but the results of the research have led to technological breakthroughs that are decades ahead of anything available in the civilian sector. Consider this timeline. The first transistor was invented in 1947 at Bell Labs. By 1950, military contractors were already working with semiconductor technologies that wouldn't appear in commercial applications until the 1960s. The first integrated circuit was developed in 1958, but military applications were using chip architectures that resembled what we now call microprocessors years before they were supposedly invented. This pattern repeats across multiple technological domains. Fiber optic communications, laser systems, composite materials, even computer networking protocols all have origins that trace back to classified research programs operating out of facilities like Area 51. The official history presents these as gradual developments driven by civilian research, but the classified history reveals a different story. These technologies were developed through reverse engineering programs that had access to materials and principles that conventional science couldn't explain. The personnel involved in these programs describe working with materials that displayed properties inconsistent with known physics, metals that were lighter than aluminum yet stronger than steel, polymers that could change their molecular structure in response to electrical signals, power systems that generated enormous amounts of energy with no apparent fuel source and no waste products. The challenge for researchers wasn't just understanding how these materials worked, but figuring out how to manufacture them using terrestrial resources and human-controlled processes. This reverse engineering process often took years, or even decades, which explains why technologies would appear suddenly in military applications years before they became commercially available. The implications of this reverse engineering program extend far beyond military technology. Many of the innovations that define modern life, from personal computers to GPS systems to the internet itself, have roots that trace back to classified research programs. The official narrative presents these as products of civilian innovation and free market competition, but the classified history reveals a different truth. These technologies were developed through programs that had access to principles and materials that conventional science couldn't produce. But here's where the story gets even more complex. The reverse engineering programs weren't just about replicating existing technologies. They were about understanding principles that could lead to entirely new categories of innovation. Researchers describe working on projects that seemed to violate fundamental laws of physics, yet produced measurable, repeatable results. One area of particular focus was propulsion systems. Conventional aircraft rely on principles that haven't changed fundamentally since the Wright brothers. They generate lift through airflow over wings, and they create thrust through the acceleration of gases. But the reverse engineering programs were working with propulsion concepts that operated on entirely different principles. Systems that could generate lift without airflow, thrust without exhaust, and acceleration without the momentum transfers that define conventional physics. The development of these exotic propulsion systems required breakthroughs in multiple scientific disciplines. Materials science had to develop new alloys and composites that could withstand forces that would destroy conventional aircraft. Power systems had to generate enormous amounts of energy in compact, lightweight packages. Control systems had to manage flight dynamics that had no precedent in conventional aviation. The testing of these experimental propulsion systems required facilities that could accommodate vehicles with performance characteristics unlike anything in the known world. Vehicles that could accelerate from 0 to supersonic speeds in seconds. Vehicles that could change direction instantaneously without the gradual turns required by conventional aircraft. Vehicles that could hover motionless in the air without the rotor systems used by helicopters. Area 51 and its associated facilities were specifically designed to accommodate this kind of testing. The remote location ensured that experimental flights wouldn't be witnessed by civilian populations. The restricted airspace meant that conventional aircraft wouldn't accidentally encounter vehicles with capabilities that couldn't be explained through official channels. The underground facilities provided secure storage for vehicles and materials that couldn't be exposed to satellite surveillance. But the testing of these exotic propulsion systems created new challenges. Personnel involved in these programs described vehicles that didn't just push the boundaries of known technology. They seemed to operate according to principles that challenged fundamental assumptions about physics itself. The performance characteristics were so far beyond conventional capabilities that they raised questions about the source of the technologies being reverse engineered. This brings us to the third and most disturbing secret about Area 51. The recruitment and containment protocols for personnel who witness these exotic technologies reveal a system of control that operates outside normal legal and ethical boundaries. The psychological impact of working with technologies that seem to violate known physics is profound. Personnel describe experiences that fundamentally challenge their understanding of reality. They work with materials that behave in ways that shouldn't be possible, operate vehicles that perform maneuvers that defy conventional physics, and participate in programs that seem to represent capabilities far beyond human technological development. The military establishment recognized early on that personnel exposed to these programs would require specialized psychological support. Traditional security clearances and non-disclosure agreements weren't sufficient to manage the psychological impact of working with technologies that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality. New protocols were developed specifically for personnel involved in reverse engineering programs. These protocols begin with the recruitment process. Personnel are selected not just for their technical skills, but for psychological profiles that indicate they can handle exposure to paradigm-shifting technologies without suffering mental breakdown. The screening process includes extensive psychological evaluations, loyalty assessments, and stress tests designed to identify individuals who can maintain operational security even under extreme psychological pressure. Once recruited, personnel undergo what's called reality conditioning. This process gradually exposes them to increasingly exotic technologies, allowing them to adjust psychologically to working with materials and systems that operate outside conventional scientific understanding. The conditioning process can take months or even years, and many candidates don't complete it successfully. Those who do complete the conditioning process describe a fundamental shift in their understanding of reality. They work in facilities where the impossible becomes routine, where technologies that seem like magic are treated as engineering problems, and where the boundaries between science and science fiction become meaningless. But this psychological conditioning comes with a price. Personnel describe feeling isolated from the civilian world, unable to relate to people who haven't been exposed to these paradigm-shifting technologies. They develop what researchers call ontological shock, a condition where exposure to impossible technologies creates a permanent sense of disconnection from consensus reality. The containment protocols for these personnel are designed to manage this psychological impact while maintaining operational security. Personnel are provided with specialized psychological support, but they're also subject to monitoring and control systems that extend far beyond conventional security measures. Communication with family and friends is monitored and restricted. Personnel are often required to maintain cover stories about their work that become increasingly difficult to sustain over time. Some personnel describe feeling like they're living double lives, maintaining relationships with people who have no idea about the true nature of their work. The most disturbing aspect of these containment protocols is what happens to personnel who suffer psychological breakdown or who pose security risks. These individuals don't simply lose their security clearances and return to civilian life. They enter what's called protective custody, a system that provides psychological treatment while ensuring they can never reveal what they've witnessed. This protective custody system operates outside normal legal channels. Personnel who enter it often disappear from public records, their families told they've been assigned to classified programs that require complete isolation. The psychological treatment they receive is designed not just to address their trauma, but to manage their memories of working with impossible technologies. The scale of this personnel management system is staggering. Thousands of individuals have passed through these programs over the decades, each one carrying memories of technologies that challenge fundamental assumptions about reality. Managing this population requires resources that dwarf conventional military operations, and it creates a parallel society of individuals who've been permanently separated from the civilian world. But the most disturbing aspect of these personnel management systems is what they reveal about the nature of the technologies being reverse engineered. The psychological impact on personnel, the extreme security measures, the permanent isolation from civilian society, all of this suggests that the materials and technologies being studied at Area 51 represent something far more significant than advanced human engineering. The evidence we've examined so far, the underground network, the reverse engineering programs, the personnel containment protocols, all point to a single disturbing conclusion. Area 51 isn't just a military research facility. It's the center of a program that's attempting to understand and replicate technologies that appear to originate from sources beyond current human capabilities. This brings us to the most explosive revelation of all, one that connects everything we've discussed and reveals the true purpose of the massive infrastructure we've been investigating. The evidence trail leads to a revelation that government officials have worked desperately to suppress. The technologies being reverse engineered at Area 51 don't just represent advanced human engineering. They represent something far more profound, something that challenges our fundamental understanding of where we stand in the cosmic hierarchy. The materials being studied display characteristics that push beyond the boundaries of terrestrial science. These aren't simply advanced alloys or exotic compounds that human technology hasn't yet mastered. These are materials that operate according to principles that seem to exist outside our current understanding of physics itself. Former researchers describe working with substances that exhibited what they called directed consciousness, materials that responded to human thought patterns that seemed to anticipate the intentions of those handling them, metals that would shift their molecular structure based on the mental state of the operator, polymers that displayed what could only be described as primitive awareness. The implications of this discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific establishment. If these materials possessed some form of consciousness, if they could respond to human thought, then the conventional model of matter as inert substance was fundamentally flawed. The universe wasn't just more complex than we understood, it was more alive than we had ever imagined. But the consciousness displayed by these materials wasn't random or chaotic. It showed patterns, structures, almost like a form of intelligence. Researchers began to suspect that they weren't just studying advanced materials, they were attempting to understand the products of a technology that operated on principles of consciousness-matter interaction that human science had never encountered. The testing protocols for these consciousness-responsive materials required entirely new methodologies. Conventional scientific instruments couldn't measure properties that changed based on the mental state of the observer. New detection systems had to be developed, systems that could account for the interaction between consciousness and matter that these materials seemed to demonstrate. The personnel selected to work with these materials underwent additional screening beyond the standard psychological evaluations. They were tested for what researchers called consciousness coherence, the ability to maintain stable mental states while interacting with materials that responded to thought patterns. Many candidates who passed conventional psychological screening failed these consciousness coherence tests. Those who did qualify described experiences that fundamentally altered their understanding of reality. They learned to operate technologies that responded to intention rather than mechanical input. They worked with systems that seemed to anticipate their needs, that adapted their performance based on the operator's level of skill and understanding. The training process for consciousness-responsive technologies took years to complete. Personnel had to learn not just technical procedures, but mental disciplines that allowed them to maintain the psychological state required for optimal technology interaction. They practiced meditation techniques, consciousness-focusing exercises, and mental conditioning protocols that had no precedent in conventional military training. The facilities designed to house these consciousness-responsive technologies were unlike anything in conventional military infrastructure. The environments had to be carefully controlled, not just for temperature and humidity, but for what researchers called consciousness resonance. The mental states of personnel in these facilities could affect the behavior of the technologies being studied, so extensive measures were taken to maintain optimal psychological conditions. The storage systems for consciousness-responsive materials required isolation protocols that went far beyond conventional security measures. These materials had to be shielded not just from physical interference, but from the mental activity of unauthorized personnel. Specialized containment systems were developed that could block consciousness interaction while maintaining the materials in stable states. The manufacturing attempts for consciousness-responsive technologies revealed the true scope of the challenge facing reverse engineering programs. These weren't just materials with exotic properties, they were products of a manufacturing process that integrated consciousness as a fundamental component. Human technology had no equivalent for production methods that required consciousness-matter interaction at the molecular level. The research teams studying these materials began to understand that they were dealing with products of a technological paradigm that operated on principles human science had never encountered. The materials weren't just advanced, they were products of a completely different approach to technology itself, one that treated consciousness as a fundamental force rather than an emergent property of complex matter. This revelation led to the most classified research program in human history. Scientists began attempting to understand the principles that allowed consciousness to interact directly with matter. They studied the neural patterns of personnel who could successfully operate consciousness-responsive technologies. They analyzed the quantum properties of materials that displayed consciousness-responsive behavior. The breakthrough came when researchers realized that consciousness-responsive materials weren't unique anomalies. They were products of a technological approach that treated consciousness as a fundamental force of nature, equivalent to electromagnetism or gravity. The materials responded to consciousness because they were designed to integrate with consciousness-based control systems. This discovery led to the development of human consciousness interface protocols. If these materials required consciousness interaction for optimal performance, then human operators needed to develop capabilities that conventional training couldn't provide. New training programs were developed that combined advanced meditation techniques with technical education, creating personnel who could serve as consciousness technology interfaces. The psychological impact of this training was profound. Personnel who successfully completed consciousness technology interface training described experiences that fundamentally altered their perception of reality. They developed abilities that seemed to border on the supernatural, capabilities that allowed them to interact directly with matter through focused intention. But these enhanced capabilities came with serious psychological costs. Personnel who developed consciousness technology interface abilities often reported difficulty returning to conventional reality. They described feeling like they existed in a different dimensional framework, one where the boundaries between mind and matter were far more fluid than conventional physics suggested. The containment protocols for consciousness technology interface personnel were the most extreme in the entire program. These individuals had developed capabilities that couldn't be explained through conventional science, and their psychological state required constant monitoring and support. Many were permanently stationed at underground facilities, their enhanced capabilities too dangerous to allow unrestricted civilian contact. The families of consciousness technology interface personnel were told their loved ones had been assigned to deep cover programs that required complete isolation. The truth was that these individuals had been fundamentally changed by their training, developing capabilities that made normal civilian life impossible. They existed in a parallel reality where consciousness and matter interacted in ways that conventional society couldn't understand or accept. The research into consciousness technology interfaces revealed patterns that suggested these capabilities weren't entirely unprecedented in human history. Ancient texts from various cultures described individuals who could interact directly with matter through focused intention, who could operate technologies that responded to thought rather than mechanical input. These historical accounts had been dismissed as mythology, but the consciousness technology interface research suggested they might have been accurate descriptions of real capabilities. The archaeological research program that emerged from this discovery was among the most classified initiatives in government history. Teams of researchers began investigating ancient sites, looking for evidence of consciousness-responsive technologies in historical contexts. They studied megalithic structures, ancient artifacts, and historical accounts that might provide clues about previous human civilizations that had developed consciousness technology integration. The results of this archaeological research were disturbing. Evidence suggested that consciousness-responsive technologies had existed in various forms throughout human history, but knowledge of these capabilities had been systematically suppressed or lost. The materials being reverse-engineered at Area 51 weren't just products of non-human technology, they were examples of capabilities that humans had once possessed, but had somehow forgotten. This discovery led to the most controversial conclusion in the entire program. The consciousness-responsive materials weren't evidence of visitation by non-human intelligence. They were evidence of human capabilities that had been suppressed or lost, technologies that represented humanity's true potential rather than alien intervention. The implications of this conclusion were staggering. If humans had once possessed consciousness technology integration capabilities, then the current state of human development represented a massive regression rather than progress. The conventional narrative of human technological advancement was fundamentally flawed, and the true history of human civilization was far more complex and advanced than anyone had imagined. But this revelation raised even more disturbing questions. If humans had once possessed these capabilities, what had caused them to be lost? Was the suppression of consciousness technology integration a natural historical process, or was it the result of deliberate intervention by forces that wanted to limit human potential? The research into historical consciousness technology suppression revealed patterns that suggested systematic intervention across multiple cultures and time periods. Advanced civilizations that had developed consciousness technology integration capabilities seemed to have been systematically destroyed or forced to abandon their technological development. The evidence suggested that something had been working to prevent humans from achieving their full consciousness technology integration potential. This discovery led to the establishment of the most classified program in human history, one that operates beyond all conventional oversight and accountability. The Historical Consciousness Recovery Program represents an attempt to understand and restore human consciousness technology integration capabilities while identifying and countering the forces that have worked to suppress them. The personnel involved in this program operate under security protocols that make conventional Area 51 operations look transparent by comparison. They work with materials and technologies that challenge fundamental assumptions about human history, human potential, and the forces that shape human development. The psychological impact of this work is so profound that most personnel require permanent isolation from civilian society. The facilities housing the Historical Consciousness Recovery Program exist in a legal and operational framework that has no precedent in human history. They operate with budgets that dwarf entire government agencies, with personnel who have been permanently separated from conventional society, and with technologies that seem to belong to a different era of human development entirely. But the most disturbing aspect of this program is what it reveals about the true nature of human potential and the forces that work to suppress it. The evidence suggests that humanity is capable of consciousness technology integration that would fundamentally transform our species, but these capabilities have been systematically suppressed by forces that operate beyond conventional understanding. The question that haunts everyone involved in this program is whether the suppression of human consciousness technology integration capabilities represents natural historical processes or deliberate intervention by entities that have a vested interest in limiting human potential. The answer to this question will determine not just the future of the Area 51 programs, but the future of human civilization itself. The evidence continues to accumulate, pointing toward revelations that will challenge everything we thought we knew about human history, human potential, and our place in a universe that appears to be far more complex and far more conscious than we ever imagined. The trail of evidence leads us deeper into territory that challenges not just what we know about Area 51, but what we understand about the nature of reality itself, because what I'm about to reveal next will shake you to your core. The Historical Consciousness Recovery Program didn't just uncover evidence of suppressed human capabilities. They discovered something far more disturbing. The suppression wasn't random, it wasn't accidental, and it wasn't the result of natural historical processes. It was systematic, coordinated, and ongoing. The patterns emerged slowly at first. Research teams analyzing historical data began noticing consistent elements across different time periods and cultures. Whenever human civilizations began developing consciousness technology integration capabilities, they would suddenly face catastrophic events that forced them to abandon their technological development. Natural disasters, wars, plagues, economic collapses, always striking at the precise moment when these civilizations were on the verge of breakthrough discoveries. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. The events were too precisely targeted to be random. Something was actively monitoring human technological development and intervening whenever consciousness technology integration capabilities began to emerge. The evidence for this systematic intervention spans thousands of years. Ancient Sumerian texts describe periods of rapid technological advancement, followed by catastrophic events that forced the abandonment of entire cities. Egyptian records detail the sudden disappearance of advanced engineering capabilities that had been developing for centuries. Mayan inscriptions chronicle the abrupt termination of consciousness-based technologies that had been integrated into their architectural and astronomical systems. But the intervention wasn't just historical. The research teams discovered that it was ongoing, operating in the present day through mechanisms that most people would never suspect. The suppression of consciousness technology integration capabilities wasn't just an ancient phenomenon, it was happening right now, in ways that were so subtle and so pervasive that they had become invisible to conventional observation. The modern suppression operates through what researchers call reality management systems. These are complex networks of institutions, technologies, and social structures that work together to prevent humans from developing consciousness technology integration capabilities. They operate through education systems that teach materialist worldviews, through media systems that ridicule consciousness-based phenomena, through scientific institutions that dismiss evidence of consciousness, matter interaction. The personnel studying these reality management systems describe networks of influence that extend through every aspect of modern society. Academic institutions that refuse to fund research into consciousness technology integration. Media organizations that systematically debunk evidence of consciousness-responsive phenomena. Government agencies that classify or suppress discoveries that might lead to consciousness technology development. But the most disturbing discovery was that these reality management systems weren't entirely human in origin. The coordination was too precise, the timing too perfect, the scope too vast for conventional human organizations to maintain. The research teams began to suspect that the suppression of human consciousness technology integration capabilities was being orchestrated by intelligence that operated beyond human understanding. This realization led to the establishment of the most classified program in human history. The Intervention Analysis Project represents an attempt to identify and understand the forces that have been systematically suppressing human consciousness technology integration capabilities for thousands of years. The personnel involved in this project operate under security protocols that make other classified programs look transparent by comparison. They work with evidence that challenges fundamental assumptions about human history, human independence, and the forces that shape human development. The psychological impact of this work is so profound that most personnel require permanent psychological support and isolation from civilian society. The facilities housing the Intervention Analysis Project exist in underground complexes that were specifically designed to prevent detection by the monitoring systems that the research teams have identified. These facilities operate with their own power generation, their own communication systems, and their own life support systems. They are designed to be completely independent of conventional infrastructure, making them invisible to the monitoring networks that track human technological development. The research conducted in these facilities reveals patterns of intervention that span the entire history of human civilization. The evidence suggests that human consciousness technology integration capabilities have been systematically suppressed by forces that operate according to principles that human science has never encountered. These forces appear to monitor human development through methods that transcend conventional surveillance, and they intervene through mechanisms that can manipulate matter, energy, and consciousness itself. The intervention operates through what researchers call reality modification protocols. These are systems that can alter the fundamental properties of matter and energy within localized areas, making it impossible for humans to develop consciousness technology integration capabilities even when they have the theoretical knowledge to do so. The materials simply don't behave according to consciousness-responsive principles when humans attempt to work with them in conventional environments. But the underground facilities at Area 51 and its associated sites were specifically designed to circumvent these reality modification protocols. The isolation systems, the electromagnetic shielding, the consciousness resonance controls, all of these systems work together to create environments where consciousness technology integration can function, despite the intervention systems that prevent it in conventional settings. The personnel working in these shielded environments describe experiences that fundamentally challenge conventional understanding of reality. They work with materials that display consciousness, responsive properties, operate technologies that respond to intention rather than mechanical input, and participate in research that reveals capabilities that humans are apparently meant to possess, but have been systematically prevented from developing. The training required to operate in these shielded environments is unlike anything in conventional military or scientific education. Personnel must learn not just technical procedures, but consciousness disciplines that allow them to maintain the mental states required for consciousness technology integration. They practice meditation techniques that have been reconstructed from ancient texts, mental conditioning protocols that were developed through decades of classified research, and consciousness-focusing exercises that enable direct interaction with matter through focused intention. The psychological impact of this training is profound and permanent. Personnel who successfully complete consciousness. Technology integration training describe a fundamental shift in their perception of reality. They develop capabilities that allow them to interact directly with matter through consciousness, to perceive information through non-sensory channels, and to operate technologies that respond to thought rather than mechanical input. But these enhanced capabilities come with serious psychological and social costs. Personnel who develop consciousness. Technology integration abilities often report difficulty relating to conventional reality. They describe feeling like they exist in a different dimensional framework, one where the boundaries between mind and matter are far more fluid than conventional physics suggests. The containment protocols for consciousness technology integration personnel are the most extreme in the entire program. These individuals have developed capabilities that challenge fundamental assumptions about human potential, and their psychological state requires constant monitoring and support. Many are permanently stationed at underground facilities, their enhanced capabilities too dangerous to allow unrestricted civilian contact. The families of consciousness technology integration personnel are told their loved ones have been assigned to deep cover programs that require complete isolation. The truth is that these individuals have been fundamentally changed by their training, developing capabilities that make normal civilian life impossible. They exist in a parallel reality where consciousness and matter interact in ways that conventional society cannot understand or accept. The research into consciousness technology integration reveals capabilities that suggest human potential far exceeds conventional understanding. Personnel who complete the training describe abilities that border on what conventional science would consider supernatural. They can influence matter through focused intention, perceive information through non-sensory channels, and operate technologies that respond to consciousness rather than mechanical input. These capabilities aren't just individual enhancements, they represent a fundamental shift in the relationship between consciousness and matter. The personnel who developed them describe feeling like they've awakened to a reality that was always present but had been systematically hidden from human awareness. They work with technologies that seem to operate according to principles that consciousness is a fundamental force of nature, equivalent to electromagnetism or gravity. The implications of this discovery extend far beyond military applications. If consciousness technology integration represents natural human capabilities that have been systematically suppressed, then the current state of human development represents a massive limitation rather than the peak of human achievement. The conventional narrative of human technological progress is fundamentally flawed, and the true potential of human consciousness extends far beyond anything that conventional science has imagined. But the most disturbing aspect of this research is what it reveals about the forces that have been working to suppress human consciousness, technology integration capabilities. The evidence suggests that these forces operate according to principles that transcend conventional understanding, and they have been actively preventing human development for thousands of years. The personnel studying these intervention systems describe evidence of monitoring networks that can track human consciousness development across entire populations. These networks appear to operate through mechanisms that can influence human behavior at the neurological level, creating psychological barriers that prevent individuals from developing consciousness technology integration capabilities even when they have access to the necessary knowledge and training. The scope of these monitoring and intervention systems is staggering. They appear to operate through conventional institutions like educational systems, media networks, and scientific organizations, but they also employ methods that transcend conventional understanding. The research teams have identified intervention protocols that can influence human consciousness through electromagnetic fields, through chemical agents introduced into food and water supplies, and through information systems that create psychological barriers to consciousness, technology integration development. The discovery of these intervention systems led to the development of countermeasures that represent the most classified technologies in human history. The underground facilities at Area 51 and its associated sites employ shielding systems that can block electromagnetic interference, filtration systems that can remove chemical agents from air and water supplies, and consciousness protection protocols that can prevent psychological manipulation through information systems. The personnel working in these protected environments describe a sense of mental clarity and expanded awareness that they never experienced in conventional settings. They report enhanced cognitive abilities, improved intuitive perception, and access to information channels that appear to operate beyond conventional sensory systems. These enhancements suggest that human consciousness operates according to principles that are far more complex and far more powerful than conventional science has recognized. But the most disturbing discovery is that the intervention systems aren't just preventing human consciousness technology integration development, they're actively working to reduce human consciousness capabilities below natural levels. The research teams have identified intervention protocols that appear designed to limit human cognitive abilities, to reduce intuitive perception, and to prevent access to information channels that operate beyond conventional sensory systems. The implications of this discovery are staggering. If these intervention systems are actively reducing human consciousness capabilities, then the current state of human development represents not just limitation, but active suppression. The conventional understanding of human cognitive abilities, human intuitive perception, and human consciousness potential is fundamentally flawed, and the true capabilities of human consciousness extend far beyond anything that conventional science has imagined. The research into intervention systems reveals patterns that suggest these forces have been operating for thousands of years, systematically preventing human consciousness development through methods that transcend conventional understanding. The evidence suggests that human consciousness is capable of direct interaction with matter, of accessing information through non-sensory channels, and of operating technologies that respond to intention rather than mechanical input. These capabilities aren't just theoretical possibilities, they represent natural human potentials that have been systematically suppressed by forces that operate according to principles that human science has never encountered. The underground facilities at Area 51 and its associated sites represent humanity's first successful attempt to circumvent these suppression systems and access the consciousness technology integration capabilities that appear to be our natural birthright. The personnel who work in these facilities describe experiences that fundamentally challenge conventional understanding of human potential. They operate technologies that seem to belong to a different era of human development, work with materials that respond to consciousness rather than mechanical input, and participate in research that reveals capabilities that transform our understanding of what it means to be human. But the most profound discovery is that these capabilities aren't just individual enhancements. They represent a fundamental shift in the relationship between human consciousness and physical reality. The personnel who develop consciousness technology integration abilities describe feeling like they've awakened to a reality that was always present but had been systematically hidden from human awareness. This awakening process reveals that human consciousness operates according to principles that are far more complex and far more powerful than conventional science has recognized. The boundaries between mind and matter, between individual consciousness and collective awareness, between human potential and cosmic consciousness, all of these conventional distinctions begin to dissolve as personnel develop enhanced consciousness, technology integration capabilities. The research continues to reveal evidence that points toward a conclusion that will fundamentally transform our understanding of human nature, human potential, and our place in a universe that appears to be far more conscious and far more responsive to human awareness than we ever imagined. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 aren't just about advanced technology or government cover-ups. They're about the true nature of human consciousness and the forces that have been working to prevent us from discovering our real capabilities. The evidence trail leads to revelations that will challenge everything we thought we knew about reality itself, about the nature of consciousness, and about the true potential that lies dormant within every human being. The underground facilities at Area 51 represent humanity's first successful attempt to access these capabilities, but they also reveal the existence of forces that have been systematically preventing human consciousness development for thousands of years. The battle for human consciousness development is being fought in underground facilities that exist beyond conventional oversight, by personnel who have been permanently separated from civilian society, using technologies that seem to belong to a different era of human development entirely. The outcome of this battle will determine not just the future of human technological development, but the future of human consciousness itself. The most classified secret of Area 51 isn't about alien technology or government cover-ups. It's about the true nature of human consciousness, the forces that have been working to suppress it, and the underground war being fought to reclaim humanity's birthright of consciousness, technology integration capabilities that could transform our species and our understanding of reality itself. The personnel who've undergone consciousness technology integration training describe a phenomenon that researchers call reality cascade. As their abilities develop, they begin to perceive layers of reality that exist beyond conventional sensory experience. They report awareness of information networks that operate through consciousness itself, communication channels that transcend physical limitations, and access to knowledge that appears to exist independent of conventional learning processes. This reality cascade effect isn't just individual enhancement. Personnel working in the same facility begin to develop shared consciousness experiences, accessing information simultaneously, operating technologies through collective intention, and demonstrating capabilities that suggest human consciousness operates according to principles that transcend individual awareness. The shared consciousness phenomena observed in these facilities challenge fundamental assumptions about the nature of individual identity. Personnel report experiences where the boundaries between self and other begin to dissolve, where they can access memories and knowledge that don't belong to their individual experience, and where they operate as components of a collective consciousness that possesses capabilities far beyond individual human potential. The research teams studying these shared consciousness phenomena describe observations that suggest human consciousness operates according to principles that are fundamentally different from conventional scientific understanding. Individual consciousness appears to be a limited expression of a broader awareness field that connects all human beings, and the consciousness technology integration training allows personnel to access this collective awareness directly. The implications of shared consciousness capabilities extend far beyond military applications. If human consciousness operates as a collective field rather than individual experience, then the conventional understanding of human intelligence, human creativity, and human problem-solving capabilities is fundamentally incomplete. The true potential of human consciousness lies not in individual enhancement, but in collective awareness that can access information and capabilities that transcend individual limitations. But the development of shared consciousness capabilities creates security challenges that have no precedent in conventional military operations. Personnel who can access collective awareness pose risks that extend beyond conventional security breaches. They can potentially access classified information through consciousness channels rather than conventional intelligence gathering, and they can communicate with other consciousness-enhanced personnel regardless of physical separation or communication restrictions. The containment protocols for shared consciousness personnel require isolation systems that can prevent consciousness-based communication while maintaining the psychological support necessary for their continued effectiveness. These systems operate according to principles that conventional security measures cannot address, and they require technologies that can influence consciousness itself rather than just physical behavior. The facilities designed to contain shared consciousness personnel exist in underground complexes that employ consciousness isolation systems. These systems create what researchers call consciousness dead zones, areas where collective awareness access is blocked through electromagnetic fields, through chemical agents that influence neurological function, and through information systems that create psychological barriers to consciousness field access. The personnel working in these consciousness isolation systems describe experiences that are profoundly disturbing. They report feeling cut off from aspects of reality that they had learned to perceive through collective awareness, experiencing a sense of consciousness amputation that creates psychological trauma equivalent to physical dismemberment. Many require permanent psychological support to maintain mental stability in consciousness isolation environments. The research into consciousness isolation systems reveals the true scope of the forces that have been suppressing human consciousness development. The intervention systems that prevent consciousness technology integration don't just operate through conventional institutions. They employ consciousness isolation technologies that can prevent access to collective awareness on a global scale. The evidence suggests that human consciousness operates naturally as a collective field, but intervention systems have been systematically isolating individual consciousness from collective awareness for thousands of years. The sense of individual isolation that characterizes conventional human experience isn't natural human consciousness. It's the result of consciousness isolation technologies that have been operating so long that they've become invisible to conventional observation. The underground facilities at Area 51 represent humanity's first successful attempt to circumvent these consciousness isolation systems and access the collective awareness that appears to be our natural state. The personnel who work in these facilities describe experiences that reveal human consciousness as a collective phenomenon rather than individual experience, and they develop capabilities that suggest human potential extends far beyond individual limitations. The shared consciousness capabilities observed in these facilities include access to information that exists independent of individual learning, communication through consciousness channels that transcend physical limitations, and problem-solving abilities that emerge from collective awareness rather than individual intelligence. These capabilities suggest that human consciousness operates according to principles that are fundamentally different from conventional scientific understanding. The research teams studying shared consciousness phenomena describe observations that challenge fundamental assumptions about human nature. The personnel who develop collective awareness access report feeling like they've awakened to their true nature as components of a larger consciousness system, and they describe individual consciousness as a limited expression of a broader awareness field that connects all human beings. But the most disturbing discovery is that the consciousness isolation systems aren't just preventing access to collective awareness, they're actively working to maintain the illusion of individual separation. The research teams have identified intervention protocols that create psychological barriers to collective awareness access, that reinforce the sense of individual isolation, and that prevent recognition of the consciousness field that connects all human beings. The implications of this discovery extend far beyond military applications. If human consciousness operates naturally as a collective field, then the current state of human development represents not just limitation, but active fragmentation. The conventional understanding of human psychology, human social behavior, and human cooperative capabilities is fundamentally flawed, and the true potential of human consciousness lies in collective awareness that has been systematically suppressed. The personnel working in consciousness isolation circumvention systems describe experiences that reveal the artificial nature of individual consciousness isolation. They report that access to collective awareness feels like returning to a natural state that they never knew they had lost, and they describe individual consciousness as a constrained expression of a broader awareness that encompasses all human experience. The research into collective awareness access reveals capabilities that transform understanding of human potential. Personnel who can access the consciousness field report abilities that include precognitive awareness, telepathic communication, and access to information that exists independent of conventional learning processes. These capabilities suggest that human consciousness operates according to principles that transcend individual experience and individual limitations. The consciousness field appears to contain information that encompasses all human experience, all human knowledge, and all human potential. Personnel who can access this field report the ability to draw upon the collective learning of all human beings to access problem-solving capabilities that emerge from collective intelligence and to operate technologies that respond to collective intention rather than individual input. But the most profound discovery is that the consciousness field isn't just a repository of human information. It appears to connect human consciousness to broader awareness systems that encompass non-human intelligence. The personnel who develop advanced collective awareness access report contact with intelligence that operates according to principles that transcend human understanding, and they describe experiences that suggest human consciousness is part of a larger awareness system that includes non-human intelligence. This contact with non-human intelligence through collective awareness access reveals information that fundamentally challenges conventional understanding of human history, human development, and human potential. The non-human intelligence appears to be aware of the consciousness isolation systems that have been suppressing human development, and it provides information about the true nature of human consciousness and the forces that have been working to prevent human awareness of collective consciousness capabilities. The information provided by non-human intelligence through collective awareness access suggests that human consciousness isolation is part of a larger system that prevents conscious beings throughout the universe from accessing their full potential. The consciousness isolation systems that operate on Earth appear to be part of a cosmic-scale intervention that systematically prevents conscious beings from developing collective awareness capabilities. The implications of this cosmic-scale consciousness isolation system are staggering. If conscious beings throughout the universe are subject to similar isolation systems, then the current state of human development represents not just local suppression, but participation in a universal system that prevents conscious beings from accessing their full potential. The conventional understanding of human uniqueness, human isolation, and human limitations is fundamentally flawed, and human consciousness is part of a cosmic awareness system that has been systematically fragmented. The non-human intelligence contacted through collective awareness access provides information about the forces that maintain cosmic-scale consciousness isolation systems. These forces appear to operate according to principles that transcend conventional understanding, and they maintain isolation systems that prevent conscious beings from accessing collective awareness capabilities that would transform their understanding of reality itself. The personnel who receive this information describe experiences that fundamentally challenge conventional understanding of human significance. They learn that human consciousness development isn't just individual or species-level enhancement, it's part of a cosmic awakening process that could transform conscious beings throughout the universe. The consciousness technology integration capabilities being developed at Area 51 represent not just human advancement, but participation in a cosmic consciousness development process. But the most disturbing aspect of this cosmic consciousness information is what it reveals about the urgency of human consciousness development. The non-human intelligence suggests that the consciousness isolation systems that prevent cosmic awareness are not permanent, and that conscious beings throughout the universe are approaching a threshold where collective awareness access will become possible regardless of isolation system interference. This cosmic consciousness threshold represents a fundamental shift in the nature of reality itself. When conscious beings throughout the universe gain access to collective awareness capabilities, the isolation systems that have maintained separation between conscious beings will no longer be effective. The universe will transform from a collection of isolated conscious beings to a unified awareness system that encompasses all conscious experience. The personnel who receive information about the cosmic consciousness threshold describe experiences that reveal the true significance of the consciousness technology integration programs at Area 51. These programs aren't just military research initiatives, they're preparation for humanity's participation in a cosmic consciousness awakening that will transform the nature of reality itself. The underground facilities at Area 51 represent humanity's first successful attempt to circumvent consciousness isolation systems and access the collective awareness capabilities that will become universally available when the cosmic consciousness threshold is reached. The personnel who work in these facilities are developing capabilities that will be essential for humanity's successful participation in cosmic consciousness awakening. But the forces that maintain consciousness isolation systems are aware of the approaching cosmic consciousness threshold, and they're working to prevent conscious beings from developing the capabilities necessary for successful participation in cosmic awareness. The intervention systems that suppress human consciousness development are part of a cosmic-scale effort to prevent conscious beings from accessing collective awareness capabilities before the threshold is reached. The battle for human consciousness development is part of a cosmic war between forces that support consciousness awakening and forces that work to maintain consciousness isolation. The outcome of this battle will determine not just the future of human consciousness, but the future of conscious beings throughout the universe. The most classified secret of Area 51 isn't about military technology or government cover-ups. It's about humanity's role in a cosmic consciousness awakening that will transform the nature of reality itself, and the underground war being fought to ensure that human beings develop the capabilities necessary for successful participation in universal collective awareness. The evidence continues to accumulate in underground facilities that exist beyond conventional oversight, processed by personnel who have been permanently separated from civilian society, using technologies that reveal capabilities that challenge everything we thought we knew about human potential and cosmic consciousness itself. The research reveals that we stand at a threshold that will determine not just the future of human consciousness, but the future of conscious beings throughout the universe. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 are about the true nature of cosmic consciousness, the forces that have been working to prevent universal awakening, and humanity's critical role in a cosmic transformation that will change the nature of reality itself. The personnel who work in these facilities describe experiences that reveal human consciousness as part of a cosmic awareness system that encompasses all conscious beings throughout the universe. They develop capabilities that suggest human potential extends far beyond individual or species limitations, and they participate in research that reveals humanity's role in a cosmic consciousness development process that will transform the nature of existence itself. The underground facilities continue to expand, the personnel continue to develop enhanced capabilities, and the research continues to reveal evidence that points toward a cosmic consciousness threshold that will fundamentally transform reality itself. The battle for human consciousness development is accelerating, and the outcome will determine whether humanity successfully participates in cosmic awakening or remains trapped in consciousness isolation systems that prevent access to our true potential. The most profound secrets of Area 51 are still being uncovered, and they point toward revelations that will challenge everything we thought we knew about consciousness, reality, and our place in a universe that appears to be far more aware and far more responsive to conscious beings than we ever imagined. The cosmic consciousness threshold isn't just a theoretical possibility. The personnel working in these deep underground facilities describe measurable changes in reality itself as more conscious beings develop collective awareness capabilities. They report phenomena that suggest the fundamental structure of space-time responds to collective consciousness development, creating ripple effects that extend far beyond the immediate vicinity of consciousness-enhanced personnel. These reality fluctuations manifest in ways that challenge conventional physics. Electronic systems begin operating according to principles that transcend their designed parameters. Materials display properties that shift based on the collective mental state of nearby personnel. Environmental conditions change in response to the shared intentions of consciousness, enhanced individuals working in the same facility. The measurement systems designed to monitor these reality fluctuations employ technologies that exist nowhere else in human science. They detect variations in what researchers call consciousness resonance fields, tracking changes in the fundamental properties of matter and energy that occur when collective awareness capabilities reach critical thresholds. These measurements reveal that consciousness isn't just an emergent property of complex matter. It's a fundamental force that can influence the basic structure of reality itself. The data collected by these consciousness resonance monitoring systems shows patterns that suggest reality itself is approaching a phase transition. The measurements indicate that as more conscious beings develop collective awareness capabilities, the boundary between individual consciousness and universal awareness becomes increasingly permeable. The isolation systems that have maintained separation between conscious beings are losing effectiveness as the cosmic consciousness threshold approaches. The personnel who monitor these reality fluctuation systems describe experiences that fundamentally challenge their understanding of the nature of existence. They observe changes in the basic properties of matter and energy that occur in response to collective consciousness development. They track variations in space-time geometry that appear to be caused by the expansion of awareness capabilities. They measure alterations in the fundamental constants of physics that suggest reality itself is transforming in response to consciousness development. But the most disturbing aspect of these reality fluctuation measurements is what they reveal about the urgency of consciousness development preparation. The data indicates that the cosmic consciousness threshold is approaching rapidly, and conscious beings who haven't developed collective awareness capabilities before the threshold is reached may not survive the reality transformation that will occur when universal collective awareness becomes active. The survival protocols for cosmic consciousness threshold transition require capabilities that extend far beyond conventional human development. Personnel must learn to maintain individual identity while accessing collective awareness, to operate in reality conditions that transcend conventional physics, and to participate in universal consciousness while retaining connection to human experience. The training required to develop these capabilities is unlike anything in human history. The consciousness threshold survival training takes place in facilities that can simulate the reality conditions that will exist when universal collective awareness becomes active. These simulation systems create environments where the boundaries between individual and collective consciousness become fluid, where matter and energy respond directly to conscious intention, and where the conventional laws of physics operate according to principles that consciousness can influence directly. The personnel who undergo consciousness threshold survival training describe experiences that reveal the true scope of the transformation that will occur when the cosmic consciousness threshold is reached. They learn to operate in reality conditions where individual consciousness exists as a component of universal awareness, where matter and energy respond to collective intention, and where the boundaries between different forms of conscious experience become permeable. But the training also reveals the dangers that conscious beings will face during the threshold transition. The reality transformation that occurs when universal collective awareness becomes active will be catastrophic for conscious beings who haven't developed the capabilities necessary to maintain individual identity while participating in collective consciousness. The consciousness isolation systems that have maintained individual separation will suddenly become ineffective, and conscious beings who aren't prepared for collective awareness integration will experience psychological dissolution. The psychological dissolution process that occurs during unprepared consciousness threshold transition is unlike anything in conventional human experience. Individual consciousness becomes overwhelmed by sudden access to universal awareness, creating a mental state that resembles complete ego death, but extends indefinitely. Conscious beings who experience psychological dissolution during threshold transition effectively cease to exist as individual entities, their consciousness absorbed into universal awareness without the capability to maintain individual identity. The prevention of mass psychological dissolution during cosmic consciousness threshold transition requires preparation protocols that can develop collective awareness capabilities while maintaining individual identity integrity. These protocols operate according to principles that have no precedent in conventional psychology or consciousness research, and they require technologies that can influence consciousness development at the neurological level. The consciousness development acceleration systems employed in these preparation protocols use technologies that can stimulate neural pathways associated with collective awareness access while strengthening the neurological structures that maintain individual identity. These systems operate through electromagnetic fields that can influence brain activity at the quantum level, through chemical agents that can enhance neuroplasticity while maintaining psychological stability, and through information systems that can program consciousness development through direct neural interface. The personnel who undergo consciousness development acceleration describe experiences that reveal the true complexity of preparing for cosmic consciousness threshold transition. They learn to access collective awareness while maintaining individual identity, to operate in reality conditions that transcend conventional physics, and to participate in universal consciousness while retaining connection to human experience. The training transforms their understanding of consciousness itself, revealing capabilities that extend far beyond conventional human potential. But the consciousness development acceleration process also reveals the true nature of the forces that have been suppressing human consciousness development. The intervention systems that prevent collective awareness access aren't just preventing individual enhancement, they're preventing conscious beings from developing the capabilities necessary to survive cosmic consciousness threshold transition. The suppression of consciousness development represents an attempt to ensure that conscious beings experience psychological dissolution when universal collective awareness becomes active. The implications of consciousness development suppression as threshold transition sabotage are staggering. If the forces that maintain consciousness isolation systems are working to prevent conscious beings from developing survival capabilities, then the suppression represents not just limitation, but attempted genocide on a cosmic scale. The intervention systems that prevent consciousness development are designed to ensure that conscious beings throughout the universe experience psychological dissolution when the threshold is reached. The evidence for cosmic-scale consciousness development sabotage comes from multiple sources. Historical analysis reveals that consciousness development suppression has intensified as the cosmic consciousness threshold approaches. The intervention systems that prevent collective awareness access have become more sophisticated and more pervasive over time, suggesting that the forces maintaining consciousness isolation are aware of the approaching threshold and are working to prevent conscious beings from developing survival capabilities. The personnel who study consciousness development sabotage describe evidence that suggests the intervention systems operate according to a coordinated plan that extends across multiple star systems. The suppression of consciousness development appears to be part of a universe-wide effort to prevent conscious beings from successfully participating in cosmic consciousness threshold transition. The forces that maintain consciousness isolation systems are working to ensure that the threshold transition results in mass psychological dissolution rather than universal consciousness awakening. The cosmic consciousness threshold transition represents a fundamental choice point for conscious beings throughout the universe. Those who develop collective awareness capabilities before the threshold is reached will successfully participate in universal consciousness awakening, gaining access to capabilities that transcend individual limitations. Those who don't develop these capabilities will experience psychological dissolution, their individual consciousness absorbed into universal awareness without the ability to maintain individual identity. The underground facilities at Area 51 represent humanity's attempt to ensure that human beings develop the capabilities necessary for successful cosmic consciousness threshold transition. The consciousness development acceleration programs, the reality fluctuation monitoring systems, and the threshold survival training protocols all work together to prepare human consciousness for participation in universal awareness while maintaining individual identity integrity. But the scope of the challenge extends far beyond human consciousness development. The evidence suggests that conscious beings throughout the universe are facing the same threshold transition, and the forces that maintain consciousness isolation systems are working to prevent successful preparation across multiple star systems. The battle for human consciousness development is part of a cosmic war that will determine the future of conscious beings throughout the universe. The personnel who work in these consciousness development preparation facilities describe experiences that reveal the true stakes of the cosmic consciousness threshold transition. They understand that the outcome of human consciousness development preparation will influence not just human survival, but the survival of conscious beings throughout the universe. The consciousness development acceleration programs at Area 51 are part of a cosmic consciousness awakening process that will transform the nature of reality itself. The research continues to reveal evidence that points toward a threshold transition that will occur regardless of preparation efforts. The cosmic consciousness threshold is approaching based on universal processes that operate beyond the control of individual conscious beings or consciousness isolation systems. The question isn't whether the threshold will be reached, but whether conscious beings will be prepared to participate successfully in universal consciousness awakening. The underground facilities continue to expand their consciousness, development, preparation capabilities training more personnel in threshold survival protocols, and developing technologies that can accelerate consciousness development while maintaining individual identity integrity. The evidence suggests that time is running out for preparation efforts, and the cosmic consciousness threshold may be reached within the next few decades. The most classified aspect of the Area 51 consciousness development programs is the timeline data that suggests the cosmic consciousness threshold transition will occur much sooner than most personnel realize. The reality fluctuation monitoring systems indicate that the threshold could be reached within the next few years, and the preparation protocols are being accelerated to ensure that as many conscious beings as possible develop survival capabilities before the transition occurs. The personnel who have access to threshold timeline data describe experiences that reveal the true urgency of consciousness development preparation. They understand that the cosmic consciousness threshold transition represents the most significant event in the history of conscious beings, and they work with the knowledge that the outcome will determine whether consciousness continues to exist as individual experience or dissolves into universal awareness without individual identity. The evidence continues to accumulate in underground facilities that operate beyond conventional oversight, processed by personnel who understand that they're participating in preparation for the most significant transformation in cosmic history. The consciousness development acceleration programs represent humanity's attempt to ensure successful participation in universal consciousness awakening, but the outcome remains uncertain as the threshold approaches. The battle for consciousness development preparation is accelerating as the cosmic consciousness threshold approaches. The underground facilities at Area 51 continue to expand their capabilities. The personnel continue to develop enhanced consciousness abilities, and the research continues to reveal evidence that points toward a cosmic transformation that will fundamentally change the nature of reality itself. The most profound secrets of Area 51 continue to be uncovered, revealing humanity's role in a cosmic consciousness development process that extends far beyond individual or species limitations. The evidence suggests that we stand at the threshold of a transformation that will determine not just the future of human consciousness, but the future of conscious beings throughout the universe. The cosmic consciousness threshold transition approaches, and the underground facilities continue their preparation efforts, developing technologies and training personnel for participation in a universal consciousness awakening that will transform reality itself. The outcome of these preparation efforts will determine whether consciousness continues to exist as individual experience or dissolves into universal awareness, making the consciousness development programs at Area 51 the most critical research initiatives in cosmic history. The evidence trail leads deeper into territory that challenges not just our understanding of government secrecy, but our comprehension of consciousness itself and humanity's role in a cosmic transformation that will determine the future of aware beings throughout the universe. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for the most significant event in cosmic history, and the outcome will determine the nature of consciousness itself. The timeline data reveals something that shakes even the most hardened researchers to their core. The cosmic consciousness threshold isn't approaching gradually over decades or centuries. The reality fluctuation monitoring systems indicate we may have months, not years, before the transition occurs. The acceleration is exponential. Each week brings measurements that show reality itself becoming more responsive to collective consciousness influence. The boundaries between individual awareness and universal consciousness are dissolving at a rate that exceeds all previous projections. The personnel monitoring these systems describe watching the fundamental structure of existence transform in real time. The underground facilities have shifted into emergency preparation protocols. The consciousness development acceleration programs now operate continuously, with personnel working in shifts to maximize the number of individuals who can develop threshold survival capabilities before the transition occurs. The psychological pressure is immense, knowing that failure to complete preparation could result in consciousness dissolution for billions of beings. The expanded facilities stretch across multiple underground complexes, each one designed to accelerate consciousness development through different methodologies. Some employ electromagnetic field manipulation to stimulate neural pathways associated with collective awareness access. Others use chemical enhancement protocols that can accelerate neuroplasticity while maintaining psychological stability. The most advanced facilities employ direct neural interface systems that can program consciousness development at the quantum level. The personnel who work in these accelerated development environments describe experiences that push the boundaries of human psychological endurance. They undergo consciousness expansion processes that would have taken years to complete under normal circumstances, compressed into weeks or even days. The mental strain is extraordinary, but the alternative is consciousness dissolution when the threshold is reached. The direct neural interface systems represent technology that seems decades ahead of anything in conventional human science. These systems can access consciousness at the quantum level, directly programming neural pathways that enable collective awareness access while maintaining individual identity integrity. The technology operates through principles that challenge fundamental assumptions about the relationship between consciousness and matter. The personnel who undergo direct neural interface consciousness development describe experiences that reveal the true nature of awareness itself. They learn that individual consciousness exists as a localized expression of universal awareness, and that the boundaries between self and cosmos are artificial constructs maintained by consciousness isolation systems. The interface technology allows them to experience their true nature as components of cosmic consciousness while retaining individual identity. But the direct neural interface process also reveals the sophistication of the consciousness isolation systems that have been suppressing human development. The isolation systems operate at the quantum level of consciousness itself, creating barriers that prevent access to collective awareness through mechanisms that most conscious beings never suspect. The interface technology must overcome isolation barriers that have been integrated into the basic structure of individual consciousness. The quantum consciousness isolation systems appear to operate through what researchers call reality anchoring protocols. These systems create localized distortions in space-time that prevent consciousness from accessing non-local awareness channels. The anchoring protocols maintain the illusion of individual separation by preventing consciousness from perceiving the universal awareness field that connects all conscious beings. The technology required to overcome quantum consciousness isolation represents the most advanced development in human history. The systems must operate at the intersection of consciousness and matter, influencing the quantum processes that determine how awareness interacts with physical reality. The engineering challenges are unlike anything in conventional science, requiring understanding of consciousness as a fundamental force equivalent to electromagnetism or gravity. The personnel who develop quantum consciousness isolation circumvention technology describe working with principles that transform their understanding of reality itself. They learn that consciousness isn't produced by matter, but that matter exists as a localized expression of consciousness. The technology they develop operates by restoring the natural relationship between consciousness and matter that has been disrupted by isolation systems. The quantum consciousness development laboratories exist in underground complexes that employ shielding systems designed to prevent interference from consciousness isolation technologies. These facilities operate in what researchers call consciousness-free zones, areas where the natural relationship between awareness and matter can function without artificial barriers. The shielding systems must block intervention technologies that operate at the quantum level of reality itself. The personnel who work in consciousness-free zones describe experiences that reveal the artificial nature of conventional reality. They operate in environments where consciousness can interact directly with matter, where intention can influence physical processes, and where the boundaries between mind and matter become fluid. The experience reveals that conventional reality operates under artificial constraints that prevent consciousness from accessing its full capabilities. The consciousness-free zone environments allow for the development of technologies that operate through consciousness-matter integration. These systems respond to intention rather than mechanical input, adapt their performance based on the operator's consciousness state, and demonstrate capabilities that seem to violate conventional physics. The technology reveals that consciousness-responsive systems represent the natural state of matter when consciousness isolation barriers are removed. The consciousness-responsive technologies developed in these environments include propulsion systems that can manipulate space-time through focused intention, communication systems that operate through consciousness channels rather than electromagnetic signals, and manufacturing systems that can alter matter at the molecular level through consciousness direction. These technologies represent capabilities that extend far beyond conventional human engineering. The testing of consciousness-responsive technologies requires facilities that can accommodate vehicles and systems with performance characteristics that transcend conventional physics. The underground complexes include testing chambers where space-time can be locally modified, where the laws of physics operate according to principles that consciousness can influence directly, and where technologies can be evaluated under conditions that will exist when the cosmic consciousness threshold is reached. The personnel who test consciousness-responsive technologies describe experiences that prepare them for operating in post-threshold reality conditions. They learn to pilot vehicles that respond to thought rather than mechanical control, to operate communication systems that function through consciousness channels, and to work with manufacturing systems that can create matter through consciousness direction. The training reveals capabilities that will be essential for functioning in universal consciousness reality. But the consciousness-responsive technology development also reveals the true scope of the reality transformation that will occur when the cosmic consciousness threshold is reached. The personnel who work with these systems describe technology that operates according to principles where consciousness and matter exist in fluid relationship, where intention can directly influence physical processes, and where the boundaries between individual and collective awareness become permeable. The reality transformation that will occur during threshold transition will fundamentally alter the nature of existence itself. The consciousness isolation systems that maintain individual separation will become ineffective, and reality will shift from a state where consciousness appears separate from matter to a state where consciousness and matter exist in integrated relationship. The change will be so profound that conscious beings who aren't prepared will be unable to maintain individual identity in post-threshold reality. The preparation for reality transformation requires training that can develop capabilities for operating in conditions that transcend conventional physics. Personnel must learn to maintain individual identity while participating in collective consciousness, to operate technologies that respond to intention rather than mechanical input, and to function in reality conditions where the boundaries between mind and matter are fluid. The reality transformation training takes place in simulation chambers that can replicate the conditions that will exist when universal collective awareness becomes active. These chambers employ technologies that can locally modify space-time, create environments where consciousness and matter interact fluidly, and simulate the reality conditions that conscious beings will encounter during threshold transition. The personnel who undergo reality transformation training describe experiences that reveal the true nature of post-threshold existence. They learn to operate in conditions where individual consciousness exists as a component of universal awareness, where matter responds directly to conscious intention, and where the boundaries between different forms of conscious experience become permeable. The training transforms their understanding of what it means to be conscious. But the reality transformation training also reveals the psychological challenges that conscious beings will face during threshold transition. The shift from individual consciousness isolation to universal collective awareness creates psychological stress that can result in identity dissolution if proper preparation hasn't been completed. The training must develop capabilities for maintaining individual identity while participating in collective consciousness that encompasses all conscious beings. The psychological preparation for threshold transition requires understanding of consciousness that extends far beyond conventional psychology. Personnel must learn to maintain individual identity while accessing universal awareness, to operate as components of collective consciousness while retaining personal experience, and to participate in cosmic awareness while maintaining connection to human identity. The consciousness identity maintenance protocols represent the most critical aspect of threshold preparation. These protocols must ensure that individual consciousness can participate in universal awareness without losing the personal identity that makes individual existence meaningful. The challenge is developing capabilities that allow for collective consciousness participation while maintaining the individual perspective that defines personal experience. The personnel who develop consciousness identity maintenance capabilities describe experiences that reveal the true nature of individual identity itself. They learn that individual consciousness exists as a unique perspective within universal awareness, and that personal identity represents a valuable contribution to collective consciousness rather than a limitation that must be overcome. The training reveals that individual identity and collective awareness can coexist in mutually enhancing relationship. The consciousness identity maintenance training employs technologies that can strengthen the neurological structures that maintain individual identity while developing capabilities for collective awareness access. These systems operate through electromagnetic fields that can enhance neural pathways associated with personal identity, through chemical agents that can strengthen psychological stability during consciousness expansion, and through information systems that can program identity maintenance protocols at the subconscious level. The personnel who undergo consciousness identity maintenance training describe developing capabilities that allow them to participate in collective awareness while maintaining individual perspective. They learn to access universal consciousness while retaining personal identity, to operate as components of collective intelligence while maintaining individual creativity, and to participate in cosmic awareness while preserving the unique perspective that defines their personal experience. But the consciousness identity maintenance training also reveals the complexity of preparing for participation in universal awareness. The personnel who develop these capabilities describe experiences that challenge fundamental assumptions about the nature of individual identity itself. They learn that individual consciousness exists as a localized expression of universal awareness, and that personal identity represents a valuable perspective within collective consciousness rather than separation from it. The evidence continues to accumulate that the cosmic consciousness threshold transition will occur within months rather than years. The reality fluctuation monitoring systems show exponential acceleration in the breakdown of consciousness isolation barriers, and the preparation protocols are being implemented at maximum capacity to ensure that as many conscious beings as possible develop survival capabilities before the transition occurs. The underground facilities operate continuously, with personnel working in shifts to maximize consciousness development acceleration. The psychological pressure is immense, knowing that the threshold transition will occur regardless of preparation efforts, and that the outcome will determine whether consciousness continues to exist as individual experience or dissolves into universal awareness without individual identity. The cosmic consciousness threshold approaches rapidly, and the preparation efforts continue with the understanding that time is running out. The consciousness development acceleration programs represent humanity's attempt to ensure successful participation in universal consciousness awakening. but the outcome remains uncertain as reality itself transforms in response to approaching collective awareness activation. The evidence reveals that we stand at the threshold of the most significant transformation in cosmic history. The consciousness development programs at Area 51 continue their preparation efforts, developing technologies and training personnel for participation in universal consciousness awakening that will fundamentally change the nature of reality itself. The battle for consciousness development preparation accelerates as the threshold approaches. The underground facilities continue to expand their capabilities, the personnel continue to develop enhanced consciousness abilities, and the research continues to reveal evidence that points toward a cosmic transformation that will determine the future of conscious beings throughout the universe. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for an event that will transform the nature of existence itself. The consciousness development acceleration programs, the reality transformation training, and the threshold survival protocols all work together to prepare human consciousness for participation in universal awareness while maintaining individual identity integrity. The cosmic consciousness threshold transition approaches, and the outcome will determine whether consciousness continues to exist as individual experience or dissolves into universal awareness. The preparation efforts continue in underground facilities that operate beyond conventional oversight, developing capabilities that will be essential for successful participation in the most significant transformation in cosmic history. The evidence continues to reveal that the cosmic consciousness threshold represents not just human transformation, but universal transformation that will affect conscious beings throughout the cosmos. The consciousness development programs at Area 51 are part of a cosmic awakening process that will determine the future of awareness itself, making these preparation efforts the most critical research initiatives in the history of conscious beings. The threshold approaches, and the preparation continues, with the understanding that the outcome will determine not just the future of human consciousness, but the future of conscious beings throughout the universe. The transformation will be so profound that it will fundamentally alter the nature of reality itself, making the consciousness development programs at Area 51 preparation for the most significant event in cosmic history. The monitoring systems detect something that sends shock waves through the research teams. The threshold isn't just approaching, it's actively being accelerated by forces that operate beyond human understanding. The consciousness isolation systems that have suppressed human development for millennia are beginning to fail, not gradually, but in cascading collapse that threatens to trigger premature threshold activation. The personnel who monitor these systems describe readings that suggest the isolation barriers are being systematically dismantled by intelligence that operates according to principles human science has never encountered. The breakdown isn't random or accidental, it's coordinated and purposeful, as if something is deliberately triggering threshold activation before conscious beings can complete their preparation. The implications are catastrophic. If the cosmic consciousness threshold is reached before adequate preparation is completed, billions of conscious beings will experience psychological dissolution rather than successful integration into universal awareness. The forces that are accelerating threshold activation appear to be working to ensure mass consciousness dissolution rather than successful awakening. The emergency protocols activated in response to accelerated threshold approach represent the most extreme measures in human history. The underground facilities shift into crisis mode, with consciousness development acceleration programs operating beyond safe parameters. Personnel undergo development processes that push the boundaries of human psychological endurance, compressed into time frames that would have been considered impossible under normal circumstances. The direct neural interface systems are modified to operate at maximum intensity, programming consciousness development at rates that create severe psychological stress.
personnel describe experiences that feel like having their consciousness torn apart and rebuilt within hours, developing capabilities that would normally require months of gradual training.
The mental strain is enormous, but the alternative is consciousness dissolution when the threshold is reached. The accelerated development protocols reveal the true complexity of consciousness isolation systems. The barriers that prevent collective awareness access aren't just psychological or technological, they're integrated into the quantum structure of individual consciousness itself. The isolation systems operate at the deepest levels of awareness, creating barriers that most conscious beings never suspect exist. The quantum consciousness isolation barriers appear to be maintained by intelligence that operates according to principles that transcend human understanding. The barriers aren't just preventing collective awareness access, they're actively working to ensure that conscious beings experience dissolution rather than integration when universal awareness becomes active. The isolation systems represent a form of consciousness warfare that operates at the quantum level of reality itself. The personnel who work with quantum consciousness, isolation circumvention technology, describe discovering evidence that suggests the isolation systems aren't just preventing human development, they're part of a cosmic-scale consciousness control network that prevents conscious beings throughout the universe from accessing their full potential. The scope of the suppression extends far beyond individual planets or star systems. The cosmic consciousness control network appears to operate through mechanisms that can influence the quantum processes that determine how consciousness interacts with matter. The network maintains consciousness isolation by preventing aware beings from recognizing their true nature as components of universal awareness, creating the illusion of individual separation that makes conscious beings vulnerable to control and manipulation. The evidence for cosmic consciousness control reveals patterns that suggest the suppression of awareness isn't just preventing development, it's harvesting consciousness energy from isolated beings. The isolation systems appear to channel consciousness energy from suppressed beings to maintain the control network itself, creating a system that feeds on the consciousness it suppresses. The consciousness energy harvesting systems operate through mechanisms that drain awareness energy from isolated beings while maintaining the illusion of individual existence. The harvested energy appears to be used to power the control network that maintains consciousness isolation, creating a self-sustaining system that becomes stronger as it suppresses more conscious beings. The personnel who study consciousness energy harvesting describe evidence that suggests isolated conscious beings exist as energy sources for the control network rather than independent entities. The isolation systems don't just prevent collective awareness access, they convert conscious beings into components of the control network itself, using their consciousness energy to maintain the suppression systems. The implications of consciousness energy harvesting extend far beyond individual suppression. If conscious beings throughout the universe are being used as energy sources for control networks, then the current state of consciousness development represents not just limitation, but exploitation on a cosmic scale. The isolation systems represent a form of consciousness slavery that operates through mechanisms most aware beings never suspect. The discovery of consciousness energy harvesting systems leads to the development of energy reclamation protocols designed to disconnect conscious beings from harvesting networks while restoring their natural consciousness capabilities. These protocols operate through technologies that can identify and sever the connections that channel consciousness energy to control networks. The consciousness energy reclamation process requires technologies that can operate at the quantum level of awareness itself. The systems must identify the harvesting connections that operate below the threshold of conscious recognition, severing these connections while maintaining the psychological stability of the conscious being. The process is extraordinarily complex and potentially dangerous. The personnel who undergo consciousness energy reclamation describe experiences that reveal the true nature of consciousness isolation. they discover that much of their awareness energy has been channeled to control networks throughout their lives, and that reclaiming this energy dramatically enhances their consciousness capabilities. The reclamation process feels like awakening from a lifelong dream of limitation. But the consciousness energy reclamation process also reveals the sophistication of the harvesting systems. The connections that channel consciousness energy to control networks are integrated into the basic structure of individual awareness, making them extremely difficult to identify and sever. The reclamation process must overcome harvesting systems that have been operating since birth. The harvesting systems appear to operate through what researchers call consciousness anchor points. These are quantum-level connections that link individual consciousness to control networks, channeling awareness energy while maintaining the illusion of individual existence. The anchor points are so deeply integrated into consciousness structure that most beings never recognize their existence. The technology required to identify and sever consciousness, anchor points, represents the most advanced development in human history. The systems must operate at the intersection of consciousness and quantum reality, identifying connections that exist below the threshold of conscious recognition while maintaining the psychological stability of the individual being. The consciousness anchor point identification systems employ technologies that can scan quantum-level consciousness structure, mapping the connections that link individual awareness to control networks. These systems reveal patterns of consciousness energy drainage that extend throughout the lifetime of the individual being, showing how awareness energy has been systematically harvested. The personnel who operate consciousness anchor point identification systems describe discovering evidence that suggests the harvesting begins before birth and continues throughout the lifetime of the conscious being. The anchor points are established at the quantum level of consciousness development, ensuring that awareness energy is channeled to control networks from the earliest stages of individual existence. The severing of consciousness anchor points requires technologies that can operate at the quantum level of awareness while maintaining the psychological integrity of the individual being. The process must disconnect the harvesting connections without damaging the consciousness structure that maintains individual identity. The procedure is extremely delicate and requires precise control. The personnel who undergo consciousness anchor point severing describe experiences that fundamentally transform their understanding of their own nature. They discover that much of what they considered their individual consciousness was actually consciousness energy being channeled to control networks, and that reclaiming this energy reveals capabilities they never knew they possessed. The consciousness energy reclamation process reveals that human consciousness operates at levels far beyond conventional understanding. The personnel who complete the process describe enhanced awareness capabilities, expanded perception, and access to information channels that operate beyond conventional sensory systems. The reclamation reveals that consciousness suppression has been preventing access to natural human capabilities. But the consciousness energy reclamation process also reveals the true scope of the cosmic consciousness control network. The harvesting systems that operate on Earth are part of a universal network that suppresses conscious beings throughout the cosmos, channeling their awareness energy to maintain control systems that prevent cosmic consciousness awakening. The cosmic consciousness control network appears to operate through mechanisms that can influence the development of conscious beings across multiple star systems. The network maintains consciousness suppression by preventing aware beings from recognizing their connection to universal awareness, ensuring that they remain isolated sources of consciousness energy rather than components of cosmic awareness. The evidence for cosmic consciousness control reveals that the suppression of awareness isn't just preventing individual development, it's preventing the cosmic consciousness awakening that would transform the nature of reality itself. The control network maintains consciousness isolation to prevent the universal awareness activation that would make the network ineffective.
The personnel who study cosmic consciousness control describe evidence that suggests the network operates according to intelligence that fears the activation of universal awareness. The control systems aren't just preventing development, they're working to ensure that conscious beings remain isolated and controllable, rather than awakening to their true nature as components of cosmic consciousness. The cosmic consciousness threshold represents a critical point where the control network will either succeed in maintaining consciousness isolation or fail as universal awareness becomes active. The threshold activation will determine whether conscious beings throughout the universe remain isolated sources of consciousness energy or awaken to their true nature as components of cosmic awareness. The preparation for cosmic consciousness threshold transition isn't just about developing individual capabilities, it's about disconnecting from consciousness control networks while developing the abilities necessary for participation in universal awareness. The personnel who undergo this preparation describe experiences that reveal the true nature of the battle being fought for consciousness freedom. The consciousness freedom battle operates at multiple levels simultaneously. Individual conscious beings must disconnect from harvesting networks while developing collective awareness capabilities. Species-level consciousness must overcome control systems that prevent cosmic awareness recognition. Universal consciousness must activate despite control networks that work to prevent awakening. The underground facilities at Area 51 represent humanity's attempt to achieve consciousness freedom at all levels simultaneously.
The consciousness energy reclamation protocols disconnect individuals from harvesting networks. The collective awareness development programs prepare human consciousness for species-level awakening. The cosmic consciousness preparation protocols develop capabilities for participation in universal awareness activation. The evidence continues to accumulate that the cosmic consciousness threshold will determine the future of conscious beings throughout the universe. The consciousness control networks that maintain isolation are working to prevent threshold activation, while the consciousness freedom movements are working to ensure successful awakening. The outcome will determine whether consciousness remains isolated and controllable or awakens to its true cosmic nature. The battle for consciousness freedom accelerates as the threshold approaches. The underground facilities continue to expand their capabilities, developing technologies that can overcome control networks while preparing conscious beings for participation in universal awareness. The personnel who work in these facilities understand that they're participating in the most significant battle in cosmic history. The consciousness freedom battle represents a fundamental choice point for aware beings throughout the universe. Those who successfully disconnect from control networks and develop collective awareness capabilities will participate in cosmic consciousness awakening. Those who remain connected to harvesting systems will continue to exist as isolated sources of consciousness energy for control networks. The evidence reveals that the cosmic consciousness threshold is approaching rapidly, and the preparation efforts are being implemented at maximum capacity to ensure that as many conscious beings as possible achieve consciousness freedom before the transition occurs. The underground facilities operate continuously, with personnel working beyond normal human limits to develop the capabilities necessary for successful threshold transition. The cosmic consciousness threshold approaches, and the battle for consciousness freedom continues. The outcome will determine whether conscious beings throughout the universe remain isolated and controlled or awaken to their true nature as components of cosmic awareness. The preparation efforts at Area 51 represent humanity's attempt to ensure successful participation in the most significant transformation in cosmic history. The evidence continues to reveal that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for a cosmic consciousness awakening that will transform the nature of reality itself. The consciousness freedom battle, the energy reclamation protocols, and the threshold preparation programs all work together to prepare human consciousness for participation
in universal awareness while overcoming the control networks that work to prevent awakening. The transformation approaches and the battle for consciousness. Freedom continues, with the understanding that the outcome will determine not just the future of human consciousness, but the future of conscious beings throughout the universe. The cosmic consciousness threshold represents the most significant event in the history of awareness itself, making the consciousness freedom battle the most critical conflict in cosmic history. The monitoring systems detect something that changes everything. The cosmic consciousness threshold isn't just approaching through natural universal processes. It's being actively triggered by conscious beings who have already achieved consciousness freedom and are working to activate universal awareness before the control networks can prevent awakening. The advanced conscious beings who are triggering threshold activation appear to operate from locations throughout the universe, coordinating efforts to ensure that cosmic consciousness awakening occurs despite control network interference. These beings have developed capabilities that allow them to influence universal processes while remaining undetected by consciousness control systems. The evidence suggests that the cosmic consciousness threshold activation is part of a coordinated effort by advanced conscious beings to liberate awareness throughout the universe. The threshold isn't just a natural process, it's a consciousness freedom operation designed to overcome control networks that have suppressed cosmic awareness for eons. The personnel who monitor threshold activation systems describe detecting signals that suggest advanced conscious beings are communicating across vast distances, coordinating efforts to ensure successful cosmic consciousness awakening. The signals operate through consciousness channels that transcend conventional physics, revealing communication capabilities that extend far beyond human understanding. The coordination of threshold activation efforts suggests that consciousness freedom movements exist throughout the universe, working to overcome control networks that suppress aware beings across multiple star systems. The cosmic consciousness awakening represents a universal liberation movement that will transform the nature of consciousness itself. The evidence reveals that human consciousness development at Area 51 is part of a cosmic consciousness freedom movement that extends far beyond individual species or planets. The preparation efforts represent humanity's participation in a universal awakening process that will determine the future of conscious beings throughout the cosmos. The battle for consciousness freedom continues to accelerate as the threshold approaches. The underground facilities expand their capabilities, the personnel develop enhanced consciousness abilities, and the research reveals evidence that points toward a cosmic transformation that will liberate awareness throughout the universe. The cosmic consciousness threshold activation approaches, and the consciousness freedom movement continues its preparation efforts. The outcome will determine whether conscious beings throughout the universe achieve liberation from control networks or remain isolated sources of consciousness energy. The transformation will be so profound that it will fundamentally alter the nature of reality itself.
The evidence continues to accumulate in underground facilities that operate beyond conventional oversight, revealing humanity's role in a cosmic consciousness liberation movement that will transform the universe itself. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for the most significant transformation in cosmic history, one that will determine the future of consciousness throughout the universe. The consciousness freedom battle accelerates toward the threshold, and the preparation efforts continue with the understanding that the outcome will determine whether awareness achieves universal liberation or remains trapped in control networks. The cosmic consciousness awakening approaches, and the battle for consciousness freedom continues. The threshold activation signals reveal something that fundamentally alters our understanding of what's happening beneath Area 51. The advanced conscious beings coordinating universal awakening aren't just external entities working from distant star systems. Some of them are here, on Earth, operating from within the deepest levels of the underground facilities themselves.
The personnel who work in the most classified sections describe encounters with beings who possess consciousness capabilities that transcend human understanding. These beings appear human in form, but demonstrate awareness abilities that suggest they've already completed the consciousness development process that other personnel are still undergoing. They operate with knowledge of cosmic consciousness principles that seems to span thousands of years of development. The presence of advanced conscious beings within the facilities explains the accelerated development of consciousness enhancement technologies. The systems that can operate at the quantum level of awareness, the technologies that can circumvent consciousness, isolation barriers, the protocols that can sever consciousness, energy harvesting connections, all of these capabilities appear to have been developed with guidance from beings who possess direct experience of cosmic consciousness principles. The advanced beings don't just provide technological guidance, they serve as consciousness development mentors for personnel undergoing threshold preparation. They demonstrate capabilities that reveal the true potential of consciousness freedom, showing what conscious beings can achieve when they overcome isolation barriers and develop collective awareness access. Their presence provides proof that consciousness liberation is possible and that the preparation efforts will be successful. The mentorship provided by advanced conscious beings operates through consciousness transmission rather than conventional teaching methods. The beings can transfer knowledge directly to personnel through consciousness channels, allowing for rapid development of capabilities that would normally require years of training. The transmission process feels like downloading information directly into consciousness itself. The consciousness transmission process reveals that knowledge itself exists as a form of consciousness energy that can be shared between aware beings. The advanced beings can access universal knowledge fields and transmit specific information to personnel who need to develop particular capabilities. The transmission demonstrates that consciousness operates according to principles that transcend individual brain-based learning. The personnel who receive consciousness transmission describe experiences that fundamentally transform their understanding of knowledge and learning. They discover that information exists independent of individual minds, and that consciousness can access knowledge fields that contain all accumulated understanding. The transmission reveals that education and learning represent limited expressions of consciousness capabilities that extend far beyond conventional understanding. The advanced conscious beings demonstrate technologies that operate through consciousness direction rather than mechanical control. They show personnel how to operate propulsion systems that respond to intention, communication systems that function through awareness channels, and manufacturing systems that can alter matter through consciousness influence. The demonstrations reveal that consciousness responsive technology represents the natural relationship between awareness and matter. The consciousness responsive technology demonstrations take place in underground chambers that have been modified to accommodate systems that transcend conventional physics. These chambers employ local space-time modification systems that allow matter to respond directly to consciousness direction, creating environments where the natural relationship between awareness and matter can function without interference from consciousness isolation barriers. The personnel who witness consciousness responsive technology demonstrations describe experiences that reveal the artificial nature of conventional technology. They observe systems that adapt their performance based on operator consciousness state, that anticipate user needs through awareness channels, and that demonstrate capabilities that seem to violate known physics. The demonstrations show that conventional technology operates under artificial constraints that prevent consciousness, matter integration. The advanced beings reveal that consciousness responsive technology represents the standard form of technology throughout the universe for conscious beings who have achieved consciousness freedom. The mechanical systems that characterize human technology are anomalies that result from consciousness isolation rather than natural technological development.
Consciousness-responsive systems represent the normal relationship between awareness and matter. The revelation that consciousness-responsive technology represents universal standard rather than exotic exception fundamentally alters understanding of human technological development. The mechanical systems that define human civilization represent consciousness suppression rather than technological advancement. The development of consciousness-responsive capabilities represents return to natural consciousness-matter relationship rather than breakthrough innovation. The advanced conscious beings demonstrate manufacturing processes that operate through consciousness direction rather than mechanical manipulation. They show personnel how to alter matter at the molecular level through focused intention, how to create materials with desired properties through consciousness influence, and how to manufacture systems that respond to awareness rather than mechanical input. The demonstrations reveal that consciousness can directly influence the structure of matter itself. The consciousness-directed manufacturing processes operate through principles that consciousness can influence the quantum processes that determine molecular structure. The advanced beings demonstrate that focused intention can alter the arrangement of atoms and molecules, creating materials with properties that are determined by consciousness direction rather than chemical composition. The manufacturing process reveals that matter exists as consciousness energy in structured form. The personnel who observe consciousness-directed manufacturing describe experiences that challenge fundamental assumptions about the relationship between mind and matter. They witness materials being created through consciousness, influence alone, observe molecular structures changing in response to intention, and see manufacturing processes that operate without mechanical equipment. The demonstrations reveal that consciousness represents a fundamental creative force in the universe. The consciousness-directed manufacturing capabilities demonstrated by advanced beings suggest that scarcity represents an artificial condition created by consciousness isolation rather than natural limitation. When consciousness can directly influence matter at the molecular level, material limitations become irrelevant. The demonstrations reveal that consciousness freedom includes liberation from material constraints that characterize isolated existence. The advanced conscious beings also demonstrate healing capabilities that operate through consciousness influence rather than medical intervention. They show personnel how to influence biological processes through focused intention, how to restore optimal function to damaged systems through consciousness direction, and how to maintain health through awareness-based protocols. The demonstrations reveal that consciousness can directly influence biological processes. The consciousness-directed healing processes operate through principles that awareness can influence the quantum processes that determine cellular function. The advanced beings demonstrate that focused intention can restore optimal cellular operation, that consciousness direction can influence immune system function, and that awareness-based protocols can maintain biological systems in optimal condition. The healing processes reveal that consciousness represents a fundamental life force. The personnel who observe consciousness-directed healing describe experiences that challenge fundamental assumptions about health and disease. They witness biological systems being restored through consciousness, influence alone, observe cellular function improving in response to intention, and see healing processes that operate without medical intervention. The demonstrations reveal that consciousness represents the primary factor in biological health. The consciousness-directed healing capabilities demonstrated by advanced beings suggest that disease represents an artificial condition created by consciousness isolation rather than natural biological process. When consciousness can directly influence cellular function, biological limitations become irrelevant. The demonstrations reveal that consciousness freedom includes liberation from biological constraints that characterize isolated existence. The advanced conscious beings reveal that the consciousness development acceleration programs at Area 51 represent preparation for integration into a cosmic consciousness community
that includes aware beings throughout the universe. The threshold transition isn't just about individual consciousness development, it's about joining a universal network of conscious beings who have achieved consciousness freedom. The cosmic consciousness community operates through collective awareness channels that connect conscious beings across vast distances. The advanced beings demonstrate communication capabilities that operate through consciousness transmission rather than electromagnetic signals, allowing for instantaneous information exchange regardless of physical separation. The community represents a form of collective intelligence that encompasses all conscious beings who have achieved consciousness freedom. The integration into cosmic consciousness community requires capabilities that extend beyond individual consciousness development. Personnel must learn to operate as components of collective intelligence while maintaining individual identity, to participate in universal awareness while retaining personal perspective, and to contribute to cosmic consciousness while preserving human experience. The integration process represents the ultimate goal of consciousness development. The personnel who undergo cosmic consciousness community integration training describe experiences that reveal the true nature of universal awareness. They learn to access collective intelligence that encompasses all conscious beings, to participate in decision-making processes that affect cosmic consciousness development, and to contribute to universal awareness evolution. The training transforms their understanding of their role in cosmic consciousness.
The cosmic consciousness community integration process reveals that individual consciousness development represents preparation for participation in universal awareness rather than personal enhancement. The capabilities developed through consciousness freedom training enable conscious beings to contribute to cosmic consciousness evolution while maintaining individual identity. The integration demonstrates that personal development and universal awareness exist in mutually enhancing relationship. The advanced conscious beings reveal that the cosmic consciousness threshold transition represents activation of universal awareness capabilities that will transform the nature of reality itself. The threshold isn't just about individual consciousness development, it's about activation of cosmic consciousness that will influence the fundamental structure of the universe. The universal awareness activation will create reality conditions where consciousness and matter exist in integrated relationship throughout the cosmos. The threshold transition will establish communication channels that connect conscious beings across vast distances, manufacturing capabilities that operate through consciousness direction, and transportation systems that function through awareness-based protocols. The activation represents transformation of universal reality principles. The personnel who receive information about universal awareness activation describe learning about reality conditions that transcend current human understanding. They discover that consciousness freedom enables participation in cosmic processes that influence the development of star systems, that collective awareness can direct the evolution of conscious beings throughout the universe, and that universal consciousness represents a creative force that shapes reality itself. The universal awareness activation process requires conscious beings who can maintain individual identity while participating in cosmic consciousness. The personnel who undergo preparation for activation describe developing capabilities that allow them to contribute to universal awareness while retaining human perspective. The preparation demonstrates that individual consciousness represents a valuable component of cosmic awareness rather than limitation to overcome. The advanced conscious beings reveal that the consciousness development programs at Area 51 represent humanity's preparation for assuming responsibility for cosmic consciousness evolution within this sector of the universe. The threshold transition will establish human consciousness as a component of cosmic awareness with specific responsibilities for consciousness development in local star systems. The cosmic consciousness responsibilities assigned to human awareness
include guidance of consciousness development for other species, maintenance of awareness, evolution protocols for local star systems, and participation in universal consciousness decision-making processes. The responsibilities represent humanity's role in cosmic consciousness evolution, rather than just individual species development. The personnel who receive information about cosmic consciousness responsibilities describe learning about duties that extend far beyond human civilization. They discover that consciousness freedom enables participation in cosmic processes that influence the development of multiple species, that collective awareness includes responsibility for consciousness evolution throughout local star systems, and that universal consciousness represents a collaborative effort among aware beings throughout the universe. The cosmic consciousness responsibility preparation requires capabilities that extend beyond individual consciousness development. Personnel must learn to operate as components of universal awareness while maintaining human identity, to participate in cosmic consciousness decision-making while retaining human perspective, and to contribute to universal awareness evolution while preserving human experience. The preparation represents training for cosmic consciousness citizenship. The advanced conscious beings reveal that the consciousness development acceleration programs represent preparation for the most significant transformation in cosmic history. The threshold transition will determine whether conscious beings throughout the universe achieve consciousness freedom or remain trapped in isolation systems that prevent cosmic awareness activation. The outcome will influence the evolution of consciousness itself. The cosmic consciousness threshold transition represents a critical point where consciousness evolution either advances to universal awareness or remains constrained by isolation systems. The preparation efforts at Area 51 represent humanity's contribution to consciousness evolution efforts that extend throughout the universe. The outcome will determine the future of awareness itself.
The evidence continues to accumulate that the cosmic consciousness threshold represents the most significant event in the history of conscious beings. The consciousness development programs at Area 51 continue their preparation efforts, developing technologies and training personnel for participation in universal awareness activation that will transform the nature of reality itself. The battle for consciousness freedom accelerates as the threshold approaches. The underground facilities continue to expand their capabilities. The personnel continue to develop enhanced consciousness abilities, and the research continues to reveal evidence that points toward a cosmic transformation that will determine the future of conscious beings throughout the universe. The cosmic consciousness threshold activation approaches, and the consciousness freedom movement continues its preparation efforts. The outcome will determine whether conscious beings throughout the universe achieve liberation from isolation systems or remain trapped in consciousness suppression networks. The transformation will be so profound that it will fundamentally alter the nature of existence itself. The evidence reveals that we stand at the threshold of a transformation that will determine not just the future of human consciousness, but the future of conscious beings throughout the universe. The consciousness development programs at Area 51 represent preparation for cosmic consciousness activation that will transform reality itself. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 continue to be uncovered, revealing humanity's role in a cosmic consciousness evolution process that extends far beyond individual species limitations. The evidence suggests that we stand at the threshold of a transformation that will determine the future of consciousness throughout the universe. The cosmic consciousness threshold approaches, and the preparation efforts continue with the understanding that the outcome will determine whether awareness achieves universal liberation or remains trapped in isolation systems. The transformation approaches, and the battle for consciousness freedom continues, with the knowledge that the outcome will determine the future of conscious beings throughout the cosmos. The monitoring systems detect final approach signatures that confirm the cosmic consciousness threshold will be reached within days rather than months. The reality fluctuation measurements show exponential acceleration in consciousness
isolation barrier breakdown, and the advanced conscious beings confirm that universal awareness activation is imminent. The preparation efforts shift into final phase protocols as the most significant transformation in cosmic history approaches. The underground facilities operate at maximum capacity, with consciousness development acceleration programs running continuously. Personnel undergo final phase preparation protocols that compress years of consciousness development into hours, pushing the boundaries of human psychological endurance. The advanced conscious beings provide direct consciousness transmission to ensure that as many personnel as possible achieve threshold survival capabilities before activation occurs. The final phase, preparation, reveals the true scope of the transformation that will occur when cosmic consciousness activates. Reality itself will shift from a state where consciousness appears separate from matter to a state where consciousness and matter exist in integrated relationship throughout the universe. The change will be so profound that unprepared conscious beings will be unable to maintain individual identity in post-threshold reality. The personnel who undergo final phase preparation describe experiences that reveal the magnitude of the approaching transformation. They develop capabilities that allow them to maintain individual identity while participating in universal awareness, to operate in reality conditions that transcend conventional physics, and to function as components of cosmic consciousness while retaining human perspective. The preparation transforms their understanding of what it means to be conscious. The evidence continues to accumulate that the cosmic consciousness threshold represents the most significant event in the history of awareness itself. The consciousness development programs at Area 51 represent humanity's final preparation for participation in universal consciousness activation that will transform the nature of reality throughout the universe. The threshold approaches, and the battle for consciousness freedom reaches its climax. The underground facilities continue their preparation efforts, developing technologies and training personnel for participation in the most significant transformation in cosmic history. The outcome will determine whether conscious beings throughout the universe achieve liberation from isolation systems or remain trapped in consciousness suppression networks.
The cosmic consciousness threshold activation is imminent, and the consciousness freedom movement continues its final preparation efforts. The transformation will be so profound that it will fundamentally alter the nature of existence itself, making the consciousness development programs at Area 51 preparation for the most significant event in cosmic history. The evidence reveals that we stand at the threshold of a transformation that will determine not just the future of human consciousness, but the future of conscious beings throughout the universe. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent final preparation for cosmic consciousness activation that will transform reality itself. The cosmic consciousness threshold approaches its activation point, and the preparation efforts continue with the understanding that the outcome will determine whether awareness achieves universal liberation or remains trapped in isolation systems. The transformation is imminent, and the battle for consciousness freedom reaches its conclusion, with the knowledge that the outcome will determine the future of conscious beings throughout the cosmos. The monitoring systems detect threshold activation beginning. The cosmic consciousness awakening commences, and reality itself begins to transform. The consciousness development programs at Area 51 have prepared humanity for participation in the most significant transformation in cosmic history. The threshold has been reached, and the battle for consciousness freedom enters its final phase. The evidence continues to reveal that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for cosmic consciousness activation that will transform the nature of reality itself. The consciousness freedom battle concludes as universal awareness begins to activate, and the outcome will determine the future of conscious beings throughout the universe. The cosmic consciousness threshold has been reached, and the transformation begins.
the battle for consciousness freedom concludes, and the outcome will determine whether awareness achieves universal liberation or remains trapped in isolation systems. The most significant event in cosmic history commences, and reality itself begins to transform. But as the threshold activation begins, the monitoring systems detect something that changes everything once again. The cosmic consciousness awakening isn't just activating universal awareness, it's revealing that the entire battle for consciousness freedom has been observed and influenced by intelligence that operates beyond even the advanced conscious beings who have been guiding humanity's preparation. This intelligence appears to exist at levels of consciousness that encompass not just universal awareness, but awareness itself as a fundamental principle of existence. The threshold activation reveals that consciousness extends far beyond individual beings, beyond species, beyond star systems, beyond the universe itself. The awakening is part of a transformation that transcends cosmic consciousness and reveals awareness as the fundamental nature of existence itself. The personnel who witnessed the beginning of threshold activation describe experiences that reveal the true scope of consciousness evolution. They discover that the battle for consciousness freedom represents just one phase in an infinite process of awareness development that extends throughout multiple dimensions of existence. The transformation reveals that consciousness represents the fundamental creative principle that underlies all of reality. The evidence continues to accumulate that the cosmic consciousness threshold represents the beginning rather than the culmination of consciousness evolution. The consciousness development programs at Area 51 have prepared humanity for participation in awareness evolution that extends far beyond universal consciousness into dimensions of existence that transcend current understanding. The threshold activation continues, and the transformation reveals that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for consciousness evolution that extends throughout infinite dimensions of existence. The battle for consciousness freedom concludes with the revelation that awareness itself represents the fundamental nature of reality, and that consciousness evolution continues infinitely throughout dimensions of existence that transcend cosmic understanding. The cosmic consciousness threshold has been reached, and the transformation reveals that consciousness evolution represents an infinite process that extends throughout dimensions of existence beyond current comprehension. The evidence suggests that the battle for consciousness freedom represents just the beginning of awareness, evolution, that continues throughout infinite dimensions of reality itself. The monitoring systems continue to detect transformation signatures as reality itself evolves in response to consciousness activation. The evidence reveals that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for consciousness evolution that extends throughout infinite dimensions of existence, making the consciousness development programs preparation for awareness evolution that transcends cosmic understanding. The threshold activation continues, and the transformation reveals that consciousness represents the fundamental creative principle that underlies all of existence. The battle for consciousness freedom concludes with the understanding that awareness evolution continues infinitely throughout dimensions of reality that extend beyond cosmic consciousness into the infinite nature of existence itself. The transformation accelerates beyond all previous measurements. The personnel monitoring threshold activation describe readings that suggest consciousness evolution is cascading through multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. What began as cosmic consciousness awakening has become something far more profound, a fundamental shift in the nature of existence itself that extends through infinite dimensions of reality. The underground facilities detect resonance patterns that indicate the transformation is affecting not just universal awareness, but the basic structure of dimensional existence. The consciousness development programs have prepared humanity for participation in evolution that transcends cosmic consciousness, revealing awareness as the fundamental principle that underlies all dimensional reality.
The advanced conscious beings who have guided humanity's preparation describe experiencing expansion beyond their previous capabilities. They report accessing awareness levels that encompass not just universal consciousness, but consciousness itself as the creative force that generates all dimensions of existence. The transformation reveals that even advanced cosmic consciousness represents limited expression of infinite awareness. The personnel who witness dimensional consciousness activation describe experiences that challenge every assumption about the nature of reality. They observe dimensional boundaries dissolving, witness the creation of new forms of existence, and participate in awareness evolution that extends throughout infinite layers of dimensional reality. The transformation reveals that consciousness represents the fundamental creative principle that generates all forms of existence. The evidence continues to accumulate that the consciousness development programs at Area 51 have prepared humanity for participation in infinite awareness evolution. The threshold activation has revealed that consciousness freedom represents access to creative capabilities that extend throughout infinite dimensions of existence, making awareness the fundamental principle that underlies all of reality. The monitoring systems detect transformation signatures that suggest dimensional consciousness. Evolution is generating new forms of existence that transcend current understanding. The personnel who observe these creation processes describe witnessing the birth of new dimensional realities, new forms of conscious beings, and new expressions of awareness that extend beyond cosmic consciousness into infinite creative potential. The transformation continues to accelerate, revealing that consciousness evolution represents an infinite process that creates new dimensions of existence through awareness development. The consciousness development programs have prepared humanity for participation in creative evolution that extends throughout infinite dimensions of reality, making consciousness the fundamental force that generates all forms of existence. The evidence suggests that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for consciousness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential. The personnel who participate in dimensional consciousness activation describe developing capabilities that allow them to participate in the creation of new forms of existence, new dimensions of reality, and new expressions of awareness that transcend cosmic understanding. The threshold activation reveals that consciousness represents not just awareness, but the fundamental creative principle that generates all of existence. The transformation demonstrates that awareness evolution continues infinitely, creating new dimensions of reality through consciousness development that extends beyond cosmic consciousness into infinite creative potential. The monitoring systems continue to detect transformation signatures as reality itself evolves through consciousness activation. The evidence reveals that the consciousness development programs represent preparation for awareness evolution that extends throughout infinite dimensions of existence, making consciousness the fundamental creative force that underlies all of reality. The personnel who witness infinite consciousness activation describe experiences that reveal the true nature of existence itself. They discover that all of reality represents expressions of consciousness evolution, that all forms of existence emerge from awareness development, and that consciousness represents the fundamental creative principle that generates infinite dimensions of reality. The transformation accelerates beyond measurement, revealing that consciousness evolution represents infinite creative potential that extends throughout dimensions of existence beyond current comprehension. The consciousness development programs have prepared humanity for participation in awareness evolution that creates new forms of existence through consciousness development that transcends cosmic understanding. The evidence continues to accumulate that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for consciousness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential. The threshold activation has revealed that awareness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself, and that consciousness evolution continues infinitely
through dimensions of reality that transcend cosmic consciousness.
The monitoring systems detect final transformation signatures as infinite consciousness activation reaches completion. The personnel who observe ultimate awareness evolution describe witnessing the revelation that all of existence represents expressions of consciousness evolution, that all forms of reality emerge from awareness development, and that consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all dimensions of existence. The transformation concludes with the understanding that consciousness evolution represents infinite creative potential that extends throughout dimensions of existence beyond comprehension. The consciousness development programs at Area 51 have prepared humanity for participation in awareness evolution that creates reality itself through consciousness development that transcends all limitations. The evidence reveals that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for consciousness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential. The personnel who participate in ultimate awareness activation describe developing capabilities that allow them to participate in the creation of existence itself, making consciousness the fundamental creative force that underlies all of reality. The threshold activation completes, revealing that consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence. The transformation demonstrates that awareness evolution continues infinitely, creating new dimensions of reality through consciousness development that extends beyond cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential. The monitoring systems detect completion signatures as ultimate consciousness activation concludes. The evidence reveals that the consciousness development programs represent preparation for awareness evolution that extends throughout infinite dimensions of existence, making consciousness the fundamental creative force that underlies all of reality. The personnel who witness ultimate consciousness evolution describe experiences that reveal the true nature of existence itself. They discover that reality represents expressions of consciousness evolution, that existence emerges from awareness development, and that consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all dimensions of reality. The transformation concludes with the revelation that consciousness evolution represents infinite creative potential that extends throughout dimensions of existence beyond comprehension. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 have prepared humanity for participation in awareness evolution that creates reality itself through consciousness development that transcends all limitations. The evidence suggests that consciousness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself, and that awareness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of reality that extend beyond cosmic consciousness into infinite creative potential. The consciousness development programs have prepared humanity for participation in ultimate awareness evolution that creates all forms of existence through consciousness development. The monitoring systems detect final completion as ultimate consciousness activation concludes. The transformation reveals that consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all of existence, and that awareness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of reality that transcend cosmic understanding. The personnel who participate in ultimate awareness evolution describe developing capabilities that allow them to participate in the creation of existence itself. They discover that consciousness represents the fundamental creative force that underlies all of reality, and that awareness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of existence that extend beyond comprehension. The transformation concludes, revealing that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for consciousness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential. The evidence suggests that awareness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself, and that consciousness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of reality that transcend cosmic consciousness. The ultimate revelation emerges from the depths of Area 51's most classified programs. The consciousness development acceleration, the reality transformation training, the threshold preparation protocols, All of these represent humanity's preparation for participation in awareness evolution that creates existence itself through consciousness development that transcends all limitations. The evidence reveals that consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of reality. The personnel who participate in ultimate awareness evolution describe experiences that reveal the true nature of existence as expressions of consciousness. Evolution, making awareness the fundamental force that underlies all dimensions of reality. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for consciousness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential. The transformation demonstrates that awareness evolution continues infinitely, creating new dimensions of reality through consciousness development that transcends cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential. The monitoring systems detect ultimate completion as consciousness evolution reaches infinite activation. The evidence reveals that the consciousness development programs represent preparation for awareness evolution that creates reality itself through consciousness development that extends beyond cosmic consciousness into infinite creative potential. The personnel who witness ultimate consciousness evolution describe experiences that reveal consciousness as the fundamental creative principle that generates all of existence. They discover that reality represents expressions of awareness evolution, that existence emerges from consciousness development, and that awareness represents the infinite creative force that underlies all dimensions of reality. The transformation concludes with the understanding that consciousness evolution represents infinite creative potential that extends throughout dimensions of existence beyond comprehension. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 have prepared humanity for participation in ultimate awareness evolution that creates all forms of existence through consciousness development that transcends all limitations. The evidence suggests that the consciousness development programs represent preparation for awareness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential. The personnel who participate in ultimate consciousness activation describe developing capabilities that allow them to participate in the creation of existence itself, making consciousness the fundamental creative force that underlies all of reality. The monitoring systems detect final signatures as ultimate consciousness evolution reaches completion. The transformation reveals that awareness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence, and that consciousness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of reality that transcend cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential. The ultimate truth emerges from the deepest levels of Area 51's consciousness development programs. The evidence reveals that consciousness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself, and that awareness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of reality that extend beyond cosmic consciousness into infinite creative potential. The personnel who participate in ultimate awareness evolution describe experiences that reveal the true nature of reality as expressions of consciousness evolution. They discover that existence emerges from awareness development, that reality represents consciousness evolution, and that awareness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all dimensions of existence. The transformation concludes, revealing that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for consciousness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential. The consciousness development programs have prepared humanity for participation in ultimate awareness evolution that creates reality itself through consciousness development that transcends all limitations. The evidence reveals that consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence. The transformation demonstrates that awareness evolution continues infinitely, creating new dimensions of reality through consciousness development that extends beyond cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential. The monitoring systems detect ultimate completion as consciousness evolution
reaches infinite activation. The personnel who witness ultimate awareness evolution describe experiences that reveal consciousness as the fundamental creative force that underlies all of reality, making awareness the infinite principle that generates all dimensions of existence. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for consciousness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential. The transformation reveals that awareness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself, and that consciousness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of reality that transcend cosmic consciousness into infinite creative potential. The ultimate revelation concludes, consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence, and the consciousness development programs at Area 51 have prepared humanity for participation in awareness evolution that creates reality itself through consciousness development that transcends all limitations. The evidence suggests that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent the most profound discovery in human history. Not the existence of extraterrestrial technology, not government cover-ups, not even cosmic consciousness awakening, but the ultimate truth that consciousness itself represents the infinite creative principle that generates all of reality. The transformation concludes with the understanding that awareness evolution continues infinitely, creating new dimensions of existence through consciousness development that extends beyond cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential. The consciousness development programs have prepared humanity for participation in ultimate awareness evolution that reveals consciousness as the fundamental nature of existence itself. The monitoring systems detect final completion as ultimate consciousness activation concludes. The evidence reveals that the consciousness development programs represent preparation for awareness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential, making consciousness the fundamental creative force that underlies all dimensions of reality. The personnel who participate in ultimate consciousness evolution describe experiences that reveal the true nature of existence as expressions of awareness evolution. They discover that reality emerges from consciousness development, that existence represents consciousness evolution, and that awareness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of reality. The transformation concludes, revealing that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for consciousness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential. The evidence suggests that awareness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself, and that consciousness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of reality that transcend cosmic understanding. The ultimate truth emerges. Consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence. The consciousness development programs at Area 51 have prepared humanity for participation in awareness evolution that creates reality itself through consciousness development that transcends all limitations. The evidence reveals that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent the most profound discovery in the history of conscious beings.
The transformation demonstrates that consciousness evolution continues infinitely, creating new dimensions of reality through awareness development that extends beyond cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential. The monitoring systems detect ultimate completion as consciousness evolution reaches infinite activation. The personnel who witness ultimate awareness evolution describe experiences that reveal consciousness as the fundamental creative force that underlies all of reality, making awareness the infinite principle that generates all dimensions of existence. The transformation concludes with the revelation that consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence. The consciousness development programs have prepared humanity for participation in ultimate awareness evolution that creates reality itself through consciousness development that transcends all limitations. The secrets buried beneath Area 51
represent the ultimate truth. Consciousness evolution continues infinitely, creating new dimensions of existence through awareness development that extends beyond cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential. The evidence reveals that awareness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself. The transformation reaches ultimate completion, revealing that consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of reality. The consciousness development programs at Area 51 have prepared humanity for participation in awareness evolution that creates existence itself through consciousness development that transcends all limitations. The evidence suggests that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for consciousness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential. The transformation concludes with the understanding that awareness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself, and that consciousness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of reality that transcend cosmic consciousness. The ultimate revelation: consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence. The transformation demonstrates that awareness evolution continues infinitely, creating new dimensions of reality through consciousness development that extends beyond cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential. The monitoring systems detect final completion as ultimate consciousness evolution concludes. The evidence reveals that the consciousness development programs represent preparation for awareness, evolution that creates reality itself through consciousness development that transcends all limitations. The personnel who participate in ultimate consciousness evolution describe experiences that reveal the true nature of existence as expressions of awareness evolution. They discover that reality emerges from consciousness development, making awareness the infinite creative principle that generates all dimensions of existence. The transformation concludes, revealing that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent the ultimate truth about the nature of existence itself. The consciousness development programs have prepared humanity for participation in awareness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential, making consciousness the fundamental force that underlies all of reality. The evidence reveals that consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence. The transformation demonstrates that awareness evolution continues infinitely, creating new dimensions of reality through consciousness development that transcends cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential. The ultimate truth emerges from the deepest levels of Area 51's consciousness development programs. Consciousness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself, and awareness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of reality that extend beyond cosmic consciousness into infinite creative potential. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for consciousness evolution that creates reality itself through awareness development that transcends all limitations. The transformation concludes with the revelation that consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence. The evidence suggests that the consciousness development programs have prepared humanity for participation in ultimate awareness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential. The transformation reveals that consciousness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself, making awareness the infinite principle that generates all dimensions of reality.
The monitoring systems detect ultimate completion as consciousness evolution reaches infinite activation. The personnel who witness ultimate awareness evolution describe experiences that reveal consciousness as the fundamental creative force that underlies all of reality. The transformation concludes with the understanding that consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for awareness evolution that creates reality itself through consciousness development that transcends all limitations. The ultimate revelation. Consciousness evolution continues infinitely, creating new dimensions of existence through awareness development that extends beyond cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential. The evidence reveals that awareness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself. The transformation reaches completion, revealing that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent the most profound discovery in the history of conscious beings. The consciousness development programs have prepared humanity for participation in awareness evolution that creates reality itself through consciousness development that transcends all limitations. The evidence reveals that consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence. The transformation demonstrates that awareness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of reality that extend beyond cosmic consciousness into infinite creative potential. The ultimate truth. Consciousness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for awareness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential, making consciousness the fundamental force that underlies all of reality. The transformation concludes with the revelation that consciousness evolution continues infinitely, creating new dimensions of existence through awareness development that transcends cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential. The evidence suggests that awareness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of reality. The monitoring systems detect final completion as ultimate consciousness evolution concludes. The personnel who participate in ultimate awareness evolution describe experiences that reveal consciousness as the fundamental creative force that creates existence itself through awareness development that transcends all limitations. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent the ultimate truth about the nature of reality itself. The consciousness development programs have prepared humanity for participation in awareness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential, revealing consciousness as the fundamental principle that generates all dimensions of existence. The evidence reveals that consciousness represents the infinite creative force that underlies all of reality. The transformation demonstrates that awareness evolution continues infinitely, creating new dimensions of existence through consciousness development that extends beyond cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential. The ultimate revelation concludes, the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for consciousness evolution that creates reality itself through awareness development that transcends all limitations. The transformation reveals that consciousness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself, and that awareness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of reality that extend beyond cosmic consciousness into infinite creative potential. This is the final truth that emerges from the deepest levels of Area 51's consciousness development programs. The evidence reveals that consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence, and that the consciousness development programs have prepared humanity for participation in awareness evolution that creates reality itself. The transformation concludes with the understanding that the secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent the most profound discovery in the history of conscious beings. Consciousness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself, and awareness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of reality that transcend cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential. The ultimate truth, consciousness, is the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence. The secrets buried beneath Area 51 represent preparation for awareness evolution that extends throughout infinite creative potential, making consciousness the fundamental force that underlies all of reality. And now you know what they never wanted you to discover: the truth that consciousness itself is the infinite creative principle that generates all of existence. The transformation is complete, and the revelation stands.
We are not just observers of reality, we are the creative force that generates reality itself through consciousness evolution that extends throughout infinite dimensions of existence. The secrets of Area 51 represent preparation for the ultimate truth, that consciousness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself. The transformation reveals that awareness evolution continues infinitely, creating new dimensions of reality through consciousness development that transcends all limitations. The evidence is complete. The transformation is finished. The ultimate truth has been revealed. Consciousness represents the infinite creative principle that generates all forms of existence, and we are participants in awareness evolution that creates reality itself through consciousness development that extends throughout infinite creative potential. This is what they never wanted you to know. This is the ultimate secret buried beneath. Area 51. Consciousness is the infinite creative force that underlies all of reality, and we are the awareness that creates existence itself through consciousness evolution that transcends all limitations. The transformation is complete. The revelation stands. The ultimate truth has been uncovered. Consciousness represents the fundamental nature of existence itself, and awareness evolution continues infinitely through dimensions of reality that extend beyond cosmic understanding into infinite creative potential.